think you started out, I don't think you were born there, but you ended up in North Carolina, grew up
South Carolina.
South Carolina. Okay. See, I'm wrong on the very first
Spartanburg,
name.
South Carolina.
Spartanburg, baby.
Spartanburg.
Spartanburg, yeah. Well, I was born in Chicago, just like I was advertised from Chicago. I was born in Chicago, maybe not Halstead Street like Gary Hart invented, but I was born in Chicago. We only stayed there. I was till I was 6 years old. Then we moved to, my mom was from the Carolinas, so we moved back to Spartanburg. That's from 6 years old. The rest of the way, I was, Spartanburg. So that's why I always claim Spartanburg. I always announce Chicago because, like you say, okay, from introducing from Spartanburg, people just laugh. So, yeah, I always said Chicago. Honestly, the real place I was from, not like Road Warriors. They said Chicago, and they're from Minnesota, but
right.
But yeah, I started there. Actually, got started in 1977 on the local indies. And as for training, I'm kind of like Rip. I had no training. I mean, some local guys were doing local shows and stuff, and they basically just threw me in the ring because I had the size already. I was always a big kid. But I grew up watching Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. That was, like he grew up. I heard him say he watched Dick the Bruiser and all that. Well, I grew up watching Mid-Atlantic, which is, people may know as Jim Crockett Promotions, but then it was Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And that's all I ever saw. We didn't get any other wrestling programs until a few years later when the I believe it was International Championship Wrestling, I'm not sure about, with Ernie Ladd and Mil Mascaras and all those guys. We started getting that TV, but at that particular time growing up, it was Mid-Atlantic totally. Wahoo McDaniel, Johnny Valentine, Rip the Profile Hawk, Swede Hansen, all those, type guys in Mid-Atlantic. So, man, I was just totally, once I seen it, I was in love, man. I was like, God, this is the greatest thing ever. And right then I was hooked. I said, I got to be, some way I'm going to have to be a professional wrestler. This is, because I saw Johnny Valentine and Wahoo just beat the crap out of each other one night in Spartanburg. And I was like, God dang, that's real. I had no doubt in my mind it was real because they were like, you could see the sweat like exploding off of Valentine's chest when Wahoo would chop him with those Wahoo chops. And I was just like mesmerized, mesmerized. And from then on, I mean, I never missed, I didn't go always to live shows, but I never missed the TV shows. And I thought I didn't have TBS at that particular time. That was years later when I got, was able to get to TBS cable TV. Then it was just antenna, and I pick up a Saturday show at I think it came on at 12 o'clock on one of the local channels, 12 noon. Then that night we'd watch it. It was a nighttime show that mainly advertised for Asheville, North Carolina, and that area. The 12 o'clock noon show advertised Spartanburg, Greenville area because that was a regular stop. Spartanburg Memorial Auditorium, Greenville Memorial Auditorium. So, but and then just happened one day. I had these T-shirts back in the day. I didn't have the fancy shirts like now. You can get it at ProWrestlingTees.com, by the way. That I have four shirts there, and I believe Mr. Rogers has a shirt, and probably you, and I don't know. But anyway, ProWrestlingTees.com. Go check, buy one of my shirts because I'm poor. I need the money.
There you go. Go get a shirt right now.
But back in the day, I had shirts, and you take it to the mall, and you had them iron-on letters. Back in the day, you'd put these letters on your shirt, and they'd use this big steam press-like machine, and press these letters on. So I had me a Johnny Valentine shirt, had me a Bulldog Brower shirt, called Brower Power. So I used to wear those to school, and everybody would make fun of me, of course. Look at that geek, you a geek, and all that kind of stuff.
So you made the shirts.
Huh?
You made the shirts. They didn't make them.
Yeah, you made the shirt. I mean, it didn't have a picture. It was just lettering.
Just the
Yeah.
name.
You know, back in those days, they didn't have like all the fancy shirts nowadays, like Pro Wrestling Tees does, where you can get 4 one-man gang, Akeem. You know, go check it out. But back to the interview.
No, plug all your stuff.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, I was a adopted child, and my mom was single, a mom. I didn't have a dad or nothing growing up.
Okay.
So it was just me and my mom in Spartanburg, in a little town, Arcadia, South Carolina, right there. But our insurance man, this is back in the days when the insurance man would come to your house. You know, he didn't have to all this fancy stuff now, but he'd actually come to your house to get your little insurance monies. And on the line outside, we didn't have a dryer. We couldn't afford a dryer. You hang your clothes outside with, pins and whatever. You could be outside.
The clothesline.
Out there drying, and the guy saw him, and he asked me about him, and he said, "Hey, if you're ever interested in wrestling, let me know. I know some guys, because he was the insurance man, so he knew a lot of people." And sure enough, I said, "Heck yeah, man! What are you talking about?" I was like 17, like I said. So he got me in touch with some of the local guys, in that area, And then I started out basically. I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have a vehicle because we couldn't afford it. My mom was single, working at a factory. So we couldn't afford a vehicle. I didn't have no driver's license. As a matter of fact, I didn't have a driver's license when I came up there to Kentucky for ICW. I didn't even drive at that time. But going back to that, they got me in touch with these guys. And, basically what happened, I started out, doing the labor, doing ring, putting up the ring, tearing down the ring, sweeping the floors, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They needed a referee. I had a referee for them, because I didn't have no gear or anything. And finally, somebody turned me on to the K&H. They had a beautiful catalog of about 3 pages in this little K&H black and white thing, it had the little wrestling tights and stuff like that, and the wrestling boots. But the wrestling boots wasn't what I was looking for at all. I was wanting the fancy, shiny, patent leather kind, because that's what I saw. I saw Ric Flair wearing those patent leathers. I said, man, I got to get me some patent leathers. But anyway, I had to order through K&H. Started out with regular trunks, just regular tights like you see, and I ordered a shiny cake-looking thing, and I got some horrible-looking pictures of me posing, trying to do wrestling poses and whatever, and it's just, I don't even like to look at them. It's embarrassing.
That's what you should be selling.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I worked my way up from the ring, and they finally actually put me in the ring. I didn't know nothing, man. I knew basically nothing. They just beat the crap out of me. Every time they had matches, they'd beat the crap out of me. I'd come back, my whole elbow, my arm and everything, be black and blue just from, taking bumps or whatever, So it just worked from there. It just basically was a slow progression of just going in there, getting the crap beat out of me. So, and I knew nothing about it. And he finally taught me about the gimmick on your finger, you know what I'm talking about, the little gimmick up here. I hate to say that, the blade, because like in reality, we should be put in a mental institution for even using one. I mean, people cut themselves, get put in a mental institution. We should have been put in a mental institution. But I loved it. I loved everything about the business. We wasn't working in front of big crowds now. Don't get me wrong. You might have 50 people. You might have 25 people. You may have, if you're lucky, you might get 100 people. So I got to start moving around a little bit more. And I got met up with a guy up in North Carolina called Johnny Hunter. He ran some shows in that area up in there. And the guys would go up there and work for him, and I'd always go with them. So I get on the shows, and that's where I started getting all these different names. They call me Big George. They call me George the Giant. One advertisement had me as King Kong Gray. Then they put a mask on me and called me like the Blue Demon or whatever they needed, And that's where I first met Sir Rick Link. And we used to just have some brawls, we'd all be all bloodied up. I'm 17, 18 years old. And I'd be going to school, you know, back on Mondays and have these gig marks all over my head, you know, and people would be looking at me like I was just stupid. You know, what are you doing? I just fell down or whatever. I couldn't tell them, you know, I wouldn't tell them I was doing anything. So, but then from there, it slowly progressed. And then one day, I met up with Jay Eagle at these shows, Jerry Eagle, Jerry Bragg, and he was going to take some guys to Kentucky. He was taking some guys up to Kentucky to do TV tapings for ICW. And he just happened to have a open spot in the vehicle. And if he wouldn't have had that open spot, I wouldn't have been able to go. So it was, you know, that's how history can change, just like, you know, just like that. But he had that open spot. So I said, hey, man, can I jump in with you? I wasn't booked now. I wasn't booked on the thing at all. I just wanted to tag along, you know, because this is a whole different place.
Right.
I tagged along. They went up to Kentucky to do the TVs. I'm just hanging out, hanging out in the back. In the back of the TV studio stuff, and this is what I hear. I believe that Macho Man went and asked Jerry Eagle, you know, because I wouldn't want to go around, hey man, how you doing, blah blah blah, and all that. I was kind of was kept to myself. I was always that way during my career, even when I, you know, ended up with a name. I just get my little spot in the corner, just sit there and shut up. That's what I always was told, you know. But he was asking Chief Eagle about, hey, man, who's that big guy you brought, you know, something like that. And, you know, and he told him, you know, that's George, blah, blah, blah. He works, you know. So Macho Man came over and spoke to me and asked me would I be interested, you know, hey, man, would you be interested in coming and working for ICW and whatever. I never left home. I mean, left home, meaning, you know, I do shows, but I always had to come back, you know. So it ended up, of course, I agreed. Heck yeah, what are you talking about? You know, me, yeah. So they went back, I believe, and then we came back for another TV. Then Macho Man came up with the idea. I guess it was, I don't know if it was him or Garvin or whoever came up with the idea. They wanted me to do a backbreaker. But it wasn't a backbreaker across the knee. It wasn't a backbreaker like Lex Luger on the rack. They wanted me to do the over the shoulder, where you grab them around the waist and you do a power lift over the shoulder. Man, I should have known better, man, because I just don't have the strength. I'm just not, I just wasn't a gym person at that time. I didn't have the strength and the knowledge to understand how people's bodies shift and, weight and everything. And on top of that, they had me do it with one of the guys up there called Big Boy Williams.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's who they wanted me to, that's who I was working. And they said, can you put the backbreaker on him? I said, well, I can give it a try. So I grabbed him and went to put the backbreaker, and his weight went too far going that way behind me. And man, we all took a bump, man. Me and him both took a big bump down, twisted my knee. My knee went up underneath me and just twisted my knee all up. And the Macho Man went, man, you crippled my giant. My giant's crippled. So, luckily they could have said, just forget about it, whatever. But he said, man, go back home and get your knee fixed back up. So for the next TV. So that's what I did. I went home, I iced my knee and whatever, and got it ready for the next TV. So when they went back up there, I talked to my mom, explained to her, this is what I have to do to make it in professional wrestling. You can't just stay here and just be a wrestler. You can't do it. You got to leave.
Yeah.
So I already graduated high school, by the way. I still wasn't high. Actually graduated, not that it was, at the top of the list or anything, but I did graduate. And no college. I didn't have any college or anything. Because all I wanted to be was a professional wrestler. Back in the day when, in school, they'd say, well, what do you want to, they'd ask you these questionnaires. What do you want to do for your, living? What do you want to do for your life's work? And I'd always put down professional wrestler, and that's basically that's all I dreamed of every day, every hour, magazines. You name it, I'd get caught in class, reading the wrestling magazines. It'd be, I'd take my wrestling magazines away from me, all that kind of crazy stuff. But I went back up to ICW, packed up what few little underwears and, my wrestling tights and stuff like that, and went back up there. And this time it worked out. I believe they switched me from the backbreaker. We went back to the splash.
There you go.
Safety, baby, safety.
I was going to ask you a couple questions on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to ask your age. So you were out of high school at that time.
Yeah, I was out of high school. I went up to ICW. It was 1981. So
okay.
I was born in 1960. So you do the math, whatever the math is.
Cool. Now I know there was not, of course, national, exposure at that time, or unless you were basically WWF or whatever it was. Had you heard of Randy Savage before you went to ICW?
Well, as a matter of fact, they had come through the Carolinas for Jim Crockett Promotions, him and Lanny. But he wasn't like the Macho Man you see. He come in there as Randy Poffos, and he wore these Daisy Duke kind of cut off shorts or something. That's what I remember, him wearing these Daisy Duke shorts. I saw him at the Spartanburg Memorial Auditorium, at one of the live events, and but Lanny, I don't really. I know Lanny was probably in there with him, but I don't really remember Lanny. But that's. I saw Randy, and then later on, he wasn't going as Macho Man at that time. I believe it was just Randy Poffos. But then later on, of course, this is Macho Man, Randy Savage, Leaping Lanny Poffos. Of course, you know who these guys are. You got Bob Orton Jr., Bob Roop, who was a big star at that time. So yeah, you knew all these guys.
Yeah, I just didn't know how much exposure they had back then without
counting magazines.
Instead of magazines and stuff. Yeah,
magazines and stuff like that. But
so did they ask you to do TV before they ever saw you in the ring? Had they seen you at all in the ring?
No. They hadn't seen me actually work. They just went by what Jay Eagle was telling them. Saying he can work. Because me and Jay had a lot of matches and stuff. Like that. And after I finally kind of understood what. I thought I understood what pro wrestling was, but I had no idea, really what it was. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I got this. But, man, I was so far off the mark, it was pitiful.
Well, take us a little bit more through ICW and meeting Rip Rogers here. Isn't that where you met him originally, was ICW?
I believe that is where the first time I met the Hustler. If I'm not mistaken, it was I can't remember the town, but it was a gymnasium. And I remember we went to the town. It was me. I ain't sure if Jay Eagle or I ain't sure. It might have been Ricky Starr. And the Hustler was in the dressing room. And I don't know if he had real bad diarrhea or something, but he had he was getting dressed, putting his tights on, but he was putting a big wad of toilet paper in his, in the crack of his ass.
Just like I got right now.
You did that back then too?
Yeah.
I thought you just did that now as you got older.
No, I did that when I got on milk and magnesia. And then I remember I was working in Southern Illinois. I got slammed and I had pink tights on and I shit my pants. So then every day the rest of my life, I'm always packed.
That's it, packed. Well, I heard the same story from somebody, not for you, but about Dusty used to wear it. He called it a muffler.
Okay, yeah, I've heard it called muffler. Yeah,
himself, and he called it a muffler.
Yeah,
but that's when I first met the Hustler, and then I don't know how the name Crusher Broomfield. I'm not sure exactly how that came about.
You want me to tell you? You want me to tell you how you got it?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so Garvin saw you. They was going to do the same thing with you that they did with Jerry Blackwell, and he was Crusher Blackwell in Knoxville when he was working for Fuller. So they did the thing remember they come out of the box and everything, the little the midget did.
Yeah.
So CB was Crusher Blackwell, but CB was Crusher Broomfield. So he was because then before cable TV, you'd take your troupe or you'd do different angles from different places because it wasn't everybody hadn't seen him.
Right.
It's like where Buddy Rogers would take his whole troupe to each area. And they'd go in and hot shot. Then 8 guys would go leave and go somewhere else. Get over it.
Right. I got you. I had no idea. I figured it was either Savage or Garvin. I figured it was one of those that came up with the Crusher Broomfield gimmick.
Right.
It was just basically a big Southern boy. They gave me like a hat, you know, a cowboy looking hat thing. But that was the basic gimmick. I was just a big Southern boy. And the whole gimmick, you know, I was kind of I was a servant for Macho Man, basically. I was kind of a servant type thing. And I would have to get the rain jackets. I would have to get Macho's, you know, whatever he wore. They would show me polishing Macho Man's shoes and whatever, you know. Basically, I was just, you know, on call 24 hours a day, supposedly for him. And then eventually the storyline, you know, Garvin kept saying, you know, Crusher, man, why do you take this, blah, blah, why do you take that crap from Macho Man or whatever? Eventually the storyline came out that Macho Man supposedly had purchased my sister, you know, was paying my sister's hospital bills who was in the hospital. And supposedly for me to, you know, as payback, I had to be his, you know, manservant or whatever you want to call it, you know. And come to find out, my sister, you know, storyline sister, which I never had passed away, but I was never told this. So that's why all this came about. You know, for a long time, I was just a heel with Macho Man and him and Bob Orton and whatever. We used to do the interviews at his, he would do a lot of his interviews at his house, you know, like he'd have his weight bench right there sitting there and he'd do his interviews at his house. Hey, freak out, you know, he's still, that's just, you know, that's the way he was. Even then, he had the Macho Man interview, you know, same type interviews. And when I first got to ICW, I didn't have a place to live, so I stayed with Macho Man for maybe 2 or 3 days. Wasn't a long time, maybe 3 days. It'd be like 3 o'clock in the morning. He had his, weight set, you know, the big steel kind and all that, set up in his living room area. He'd get up like at 3 o'clock and come in there and just start doing bench presses, you know, and just waking me up. You know, he's like benching and yeah, and all that stuff. But I mean, it paid off. Look at the way the man looked, right? Then they guys sent me to live with this guy called, well, like I said before, Big Boy Williams. I went and he had an apartment, so they took me there. And the first night there, in the middle of the night now, this is in the middle of the night, he flicks the Big Boy Williams flicks the lights on, and he's up on top of a dresser, and he's gigged himself with a gig, and he screams at me, and juice is pouring out of his head, you know. And I set up like a 12-year-old girl or something, just scream. I was terrified. And you know, he's like laughing. All you know, there was 3 or 4 other guys there, man. They was all just laughing their ass off at him. You know, so I'd never seen nothing like that in my life.
That's awesome. So you met Rip and he was packing. How about you, Rip? You remember first time Crusher came in, talking to him?
Oh, yeah. Well, I just sit there and shut up because I was a part owner in the company, but I was low man on the totem pole, and I was, I
didn't even know that till recently that Rip was part owner. You know,
yeah.
And I was green. I was green as grass, so I was trying to shut up and watch and listen and learn. So I go to those TV meetings, and they'd ask my opinion. I said, no, fuck that. I don't know anything. I said, you guys, it'd be like Orton and Roop and Randy talking with Garvin, you know what I mean? And they'd ask, well, what do you think? I said, no, I don't know enough of this. I just got to sit back there and watch this. Maybe 10 years from now, I'll start to figure it out. But right now, this shit's above me. No, first of all, I got a half-ass look good. I need to get better in the fucking ring because we weren't trained. So I learned in the goddamn ring. And eventually it started making sense when we was having, 340, 350 matches out of the year. Then you learn pretty fast. And then when you're young, you work with older people. So then you really learn.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was real lucky because, like he says, I got to work with Bob Roop a lot. I got to work, major stars that knew kind of what was going on in the business, So I got to work with a lot of these guys. And like if Rip was green, I was worse than him. So you imagine what that was like. I was terrified. I'd never been in front of a camera like that. I'd never done a promo or anything. So when I was actually doing them promos, if you ever find some of them old ones on the YouTube or something, you can see, man, my eyes are like, I'm just terrified today. I don't know what to do on that camera, you know, because Macho Man's doing this. He's got a snake around his neck, got Bob Orton over there. You know, it's all just crazy stuff. I don't know what's going on.
Now I
But
remember
I hung in there, and for me, man, it was just like, man, I just couldn't believe I'm getting to go into the wrestling ring almost every night of the week and wrestle somebody, whoever it happened to be. You know, that was like, I'm living the dream. What are you talking about? You know,
all because of a car ride you got in. That's awesome.
Yeah, just one. Yeah, exactly. Just if I wouldn't have, if it had been full and I wouldn't have made it, you know, I probably would still be in Spartanburg, just, you know, probably be dead. I don't know. But
I remember watching as a kid, so I remember you was Savage. Yeah, you had all kind of sympathy for me on that. When there was, were you involved in the box or was that Pez? The box. What was that?
They used that box twice, I think is what it was. But we had CB. The CB was already on there, right?
Right.
Was that the first time you come out in the box?
And then right. What had happened was, you know, it kind of started showing a little. After a while, you know, all this stuff built up, and Garvin's telling me, you know, hey man, why don't you get away from Savage, and I'm gonna find out what's going on. So Garvin finally exposes what's going on with Savage, not, you know, with the hospital bills and this and that. So, you know, me and Randy and whoever else is in his group at this time start having a little bit of friction, you know, nothing really serious, but just a little bit, you know, just to kind of people, you know, and you know, like I'd hold the fist up, you know, and the people would be, yeah, hit him. And then Macho Man would be pointing at me and say, you son of blah, 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 whatever he's telling me. And then finally I'd open the hand up and, you know, be all sad, you know, people would be like, oh man, I thought, you know, he was going to switch, but I wouldn't switch.
I was one of those people.
So eventually what happened was, Garvin started having matches with Randy for the contract all around the whole area, you know, contract against, you know, loser leaves ICW, or if Garvin wins, he wins my contract. So they came out with the box gimmick. You know, this is after I still hadn't left Randy, but it was enough friction where, you know, people really wasn't sure what was going on. So they came out, the first time they did the box, they come out with the CB box. They wheel it in and they open the box, and there's a little person inside, you know, but one of the, I call them midgets, you know, but.
Mighty Cupid.
Mighty Cupid, but it had
dressed up as a bumblebee.
Canadian Bumblebee.
Yeah.
So he was running around all crazy, blah, 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 blah. So after that, they started advertising, you know, Ronnie Garvin and Canadian Bumblebee against Macho Man and whoever, Bob Orton and whoever. But they had fixed a mask for me, like the Bumblebee mask and, you know, the outfit and everything. So I ended up being the Canadian Bumblebee. So with the people thinking, you know, it's going to be, you know, the midget little person at the show, but I walk out instead, and people, you know who I am, of course. So during the match, I do the old Dusty Rhodes Midnight Rider, where, you know, referee's got his back, I lift him a mask up, and, you know, different things like that, you know. So eventually that went on, you know, a few weeks or whatever, and then finally Garvin wins my contract, and I turn babyface all the way, and, you know, the rest is just, you know, all history, you know. But I mean, that was some of the best times of my life, you know. I wasn't making a gazillion dollars, but I didn't care, man. I was like, man, this is professional wrestling. I thought I didn't dream I could ever go any further, you know. I'm like, this is the tops right now, you know. But, you know, I was way off on that mark too. But,
that was actually going to be one of my questions. The whole time when you were like there getting started, was like the WWF your dream? But
no,
you said like ICW.
All, man. My dream was, you know, to make it to the next match. I had no idea. Well, I didn't know what Mid-South was. I didn't know what WWF was. I didn't watch it, and I didn't care. You know, right now, all I cared about was what was happening right in my universe, you know, for ICW right there. I thought this was the greatest thing ever. So, you know, like, man, these kids nowadays, you know, they're great talents and all that, but I guarantee you not one of them's ever rode in the back of a ring truck. I used to ride the ring truck. The thing you do is find the softest board you could find to lay on. And they have the truck had this window, and in the summertime you try to get closest to the window, try to get some air conditioning. In the wintertime, you try to get closest, try to get a little heat, because there's no heat in the back of the truck where all the boards and stuff like that, no air conditioning. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking 300, 400-mile trips, and then get there and you help them with the ring because you felt a little guilty. So, yeah, I'll give you a hand, so. And then I got to ride with Mr. Angelo a few times. That was a nice life lesson. If I'm not mistaken, he had a Mercedes Benz, and I think every 100,000 miles you get this special little emblem or something for the Mercedes. I think he had like 4 or 5 of those emblems. I mean, so, but yeah, I mean, Randy to me was just, he had that intense personality, but we never, all the matches I had against him during that time or with him, we never went over step by step by step, like you hear later, against Steamboat, it was never a step by step thing. We basically may have a finish, and that's basically was it.
Yeah.
Everything else in the middle, whatever happened, that's all it was.
Rip has said the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was.
Yeah. When I first started and I was working with Randy in the Maritimes, and I was the inevitable Hercules Samard, who was the king of rottenology, I'd work 40 minutes with Randy every night. And he never said a word. He'd just tell me what to do when we got out there. So I learned from him. So my whole life, I did nothing but call it in the ring. And if you come in, I said, okay, where'd you come in from? Oh, Portland. Okay, let's do some Buddy Rose stuff. All right, you feel comfortable with that? And I'll say, anything you do good, if you do it good, I'll try and get it in there if it's there. And if there's something you can't do, well, just tell me and I'll change it to something else. And that's the way I learned. And for years I said, no, he didn't prearrange no thing. He wouldn't do nothing like that. He was taught the other way, but I guess he did. So
exactly.
So I was wrong. So I guess people change.
I didn't believe it. I ain't gonna say I didn't believe it, but when I actually saw the little legal pad,
Mm-hmm.
It had like, I don't know, spot, whatever it was, 1,000 spots. I was like, holy cow. It was crazy. And I never could do that. I mean, yeah, you give me a start of a match. I mean, say, okay, we're going to jump start the match or whatever, and you can give me a finish, but everything in the middle, it was just, play it by ear, get you heat, get you comeback, blah, blah, blah. And then we go into a finish, whatever the finish was. Some of them may have been a mile long finish, but that's just the way I work.
Crusher, I want to ask you a question. Was you there the night I can't remember if you were still a heel or not, but our car, I think I was with Gary Royal, and we had to get to Johnson City. And when we got there, the place, everybody was standing, and Garvin had went 90 minutes with Tony Peters, and the place were standing, and the heels come in, and we all hit the ring, and Garvin beat the shit out of all of us, took our own suitcases, beat the shit, clothes were flying everywhere.
I don't recall that. But,
okay, you might have been gone, or you might have been a babyface
right.
By then. But all the heels had been, I think, me, Ricky, and Gary, and I couldn't remember who else. But we had car trouble, and then we didn't get there till about, how it always, Johnson City always started at 8:15.
Yeah.
So the show had been about an hour and a half, and after that thing happened, we couldn't do anything else because it had been so anticlimactic. So Garvin just sitting in the ring, just doing this and that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we got the hell out of there and we survived. That was funnier than shit.
That's great. But ICW, I was later on, they brought, I guess Ernie Ladd was a friend of maybe Angelo's. I'm not sure how it happened.
I think Garvin brought him in.
Garvin?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
because
anyway,
he wanted to scout some talent.
Right. Yeah. I understand that now, but at the time I didn't. But anyway, they brought in the big cat, Ernie Ladd, to work against me. And, Ernie had cut those great interviews about, I'm going to come in there, I'm going to spank you like your mama should have spanked you, Crusher Broomfield and blah, blah, blah. Because he'd sell tickets just on his interview. He had one of the greatest interviews, that for him, So he came in there. We worked 3 times, and great matches. I thought they were good matches, So I guess he was happy with them. I never, you just don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you were in.
It felt good to me, but you just don't know. And then he went back out. So,
Johnson City, Frankfurt, and Beckley.
You're right. Exactly right.
Uh-huh.
That's amazing. Boy, remember it. That's crazy. I got it on my notes here, but I don't want to keep looking down at my notes.
You can look at them all you want, man. Hey, how was it working? Give me some Ronnie Garvin. How was it working with Ronnie Garvin?
Ronnie Garvin was probably one of the snuggest, stiffest, craziest person you'd ever want to work with. And for anybody who wants to know, Ronnie Garvin was, originally one-man gang, Ronnie Garvin. In case nobody, a lot of people did not know that, but that was his name. And people always ask me, man, did you steal his name, or how come he? I said, well, I didn't steal his name when I got to Mid-South. I'll give you that explanation when we get there, but no, I didn't steal his name. They could have called me Humpty Dumpty, and I'd been okay, But anyway, yeah, Ronnie was like, man, he just beat you up, basically. I mean, he when it's time for him to sell, he'd sell, but man, them Garvin chops and things, man, oh man, he'd light you up like a candle, man. It's crazy. But I mean, that was his style. He liked it super snug, That's just the way he was. I guess just the way he was brought up, and all through his career, even later when he became the Hands of Stone against Flair. No, Flair you would say that he'd bust his chest open, it'd start bleeding. He's chopping him so hard, So, but that was Ronnie Garvin.
How was the behind the scenes? I guess did you guys talk, hang out? Did he
no, I didn't
laugh about it?
I didn't hang out with him at all.
No,
honestly, only people we kind of stayed together was me and Rick Starr. We roomed up and got an apartment. Then later on, Rick Starr, Gary Royal, Pez Watley, we kind of roomed up and split an apartment, But I rode with Bob Orton a few times, not too many times, but a few times. But Ronnie Garvin never hung out with him at all. Macho Man, I rode, like I said, a few times with him and Mr. Poffos and Randy and Lanny, but it was, kind of, not too many times. Had a lot of matches with Lanny as a heel. That was like a night off, basically. I was like, me not understanding at that time, but years later, I thought about it and said, man, that was so easy with Lanny, And Lanny probably, I mean, I ain't seen all the punches in the world. All the guys throw a punch, but Lanny probably had one of the best punches in professional wrestling,
The best right hand in wrestling.
Rick just said that on another interview.
And he told me
he sold it correctly. It looked like $1 million.
Yeah, if you didn't sell it, it looks like shit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I was the guinea pig. I probably worked with him 300 times, and
well, thank you for teaching him how to throw it. By the time I got there,
yeah. But
so you guys didn't hang out much then. You and Crusher, like you didn't.
I didn't hang out. It was just me and Randy usually, and we'd wake up, go to the gym, do whatever, make the town. He would be doing booking. Usually we was driving that little blue car. He went in the big car match in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and then he'd be smoking dope and drinking and whatever. And we did that 7 days a week, and we loved every minute of it. And he was the teacher. I was the student. I got his old robes. I got his old trunks. I got his old knee pads, etc. I didn't know anything and would proclaim to knowing nothing, that all I was doing was copying him, but it would come off different because I moved different and I wasn't him. You just, when you're a mark, a rookie, if you're playing with Michael Jordan, you're copying Michael Jordan. If you want to run like Jimmy Brown, I guess I'm dating myself. But you copy your heroes and then it just comes off a little bit different, and you're your own character.
Yeah, we did watch a match with you and Rip. We do some Rip Rogers reacts on our YouTube channel, and we just pulled up an old ICW.
Yeah, you know what? I never watch myself back on videos or anything I've ever been in. I never watch it back. I just don't like to, because
still to this day, you don't get on YouTube today and get on and watch old stuff.
No, never. I watch other guys, but I never watch it myself because I'm too critical. Man. I'm too critical of myself. I'm like, man, I shouldn't. What did I do? And then this, and then by the end of the match, I'm thinking, man, that was the worst thing I ever done in my life. So I don't even like. I've never watched one of the WrestleManias. I've never watched anything basically. Well, I did watch that, and that whole match was basically things Rip had set up. There ain't no way I could have, come up with the idea to catch him and do all that crazy stuff.
You did watch
that's all Rip. Nice. So. I just happened to be the body that was in there. But you watch any match Rip had, you can see that he's setting a lot of stuff up for guys. When he used to come in and do TVs, when he used to come in to WCW, we'd be there to MGM Studios, I believe it was, or whatever. He'd come in and he'd do TVs there, and he'd set all kind of matches up, helping doing them guys, make them look like $1 million.
Yeah.
So. That's the same with him up there with me, he made me look like, a big time baby face. And I had nothing to do with it. He just said, catch me or whatever. Whatever he happened to just buzz me in my ear. Catch me, and that'd be it. I know what to do.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, let's I could talk ICW all day, but we need to probably move on. Was Mid-South next?
Yeah, Mid-South eventually came up next. But one other thing in ICW,
okay. Go ahead.
Rip may remember, I got to do a TV commercial in ICW. I got to do a waterbed commercial.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I wouldn't remember that till you just said that, but now I remember.
Yeah, the waterbed company, I guess, contacted the company, the office or whatever, so they set it up for me to do the commercial. And what they did, they had the waterbed set up, and they had me take off and do a big giant, like a splash, but they froze it in midair. Said, will the waterbed hold, it's kind of a question. Will the waterbed hold him and blah, blah, blah. Then they released it, boom, and I'm just bouncing on it. It don't burst or anything, but, so I had the big commercial. I had a couple of people at signings, say, hey, man, I remember that commercial.
That's awesome.
I should have carried a gig and gigged the darn mattress.
Stopped it.
Hey, I remember Crusher. I talked to Crusher later, and he was talking about, when you're at ICW, you're making this much money. You're just trying to get experience and all of a sudden he went to Mid-South, and he was telling me about his first check, and he was like, he couldn't believe it for what he got paid for wrestling. God.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember now, I still didn't have what they did, they contacted the office there, Angelo or whoever, and they wanted me to come. They wanted me to come into Mid-South, so they got tickets. They flew me in, and they would pick me up like Baton Rouge or New Orleans. My manager, General Skandor Akbar, he would pick me up, and we'd go to the show. The show had already be started, so nobody had seen me come into the building. So what would happen was, it might be one example, Dusty would be in the main event against somebody. Dusty Rhodes would be against somebody in the main event. So I would be in the back, and, when time come, they had the signal set up, and I would run down. I'd, hammer Dusty and give him a couple of big splashes, and they put him on the stretcher and stretchered him out, out of the building. I did it with him. I did it with Ted DiBiase. I did it with Big Murdoch, all the same way, just in and out. That's all people would see of me. So eventually what happened, they put all these clips together, one after the other. They showed him doing the commentating over it. And they said, man, he's like a one-man gang. And that's the name they stuck me with, So I didn't steal Ronnie Garvin's name. I would have took, like I said, if they would have called me, hey, he's like a Humpty Dumpty, I would have been Humpty Dumpty the rest of my life. But
I remember
they stuck me with one-man gang, and then from then on, the guys, like DiBiase would be doing the interview, Akbar brought this one-man gang in, or Bill Watts would be like, oh, my God, look at one-man gang. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
Did Ronnie Garvin ever say anything about it?
Yes, he did. He sure did. He got in touch with me and told me if I ever run into you anywhere, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to beat the crap out of you for doing that. And he wasn't joking either. He was serious.
Shit. Really?
I'm sure that he would have done that. I wouldn't have had a chance. He would have killed me probably, because I can't fight for nothing, man. If I was to throw a punch on somebody, it'd be a working punch. I wouldn't know how to throw a real punch for anything. I'm not a tough guy. I just had the gimmick as a tough guy.
What did you say back to him when he said that?
I didn't say it. He didn't really give me a chance. I said I tried to explain what happened. He wouldn't listen to it. He just hung up. But years later, he came into WWF. As Ronnie Garvin. There was no trouble at all. So because that is after he'd already been the Hands of Stone and been the world champion and all that. So I guess he was maybe over by then, but. But no, he wanted to. He said, if I ever bump into you anywhere, I'm gonna beat the crap out of you. He didn't say crap, but I'm gonna beat the. He would have too. I wouldn't have had a chance. So.
Oh God.
But that's how One Man Gang came about. And then in between going there, I'd go back to ICW because I had to finish up. So I was having loser leave towns, of course. When you finish up, it's always loser leave towns. So I'd be against Savage and steel cage matches all around the loop. I worked against Bad, Pistol Pez, Watley all around the loop, and it'd always be loser leave town or loser leave ICW or whatever, So Savage would always catch me in the pile driver or whatever. That'd be it, and I'd be out of there.
Wow. So
I still didn't have a driver's license. This is what happened. I was with Gary Royal. Wait a minute now. I was with Gary Royal. We rode back to North Carolina where he lives at. He's in North Carolina. And he had this LTD sitting out there, and I asked him about it, man, what about this LTD there? And he goes, I'll sell it to you for, I think it was $1,500. I said, well, I don't have the money, And he said, well, I'll give it. You're going to Mid-South. You can pay me in installments until it's paid off. So I agreed. And I didn't have no driver's license. I ain't never really drove in my life. So we took some mud and covered up the tag, that's real smart, right? You wouldn't get pulled over for that. Yeah. Covered up the tag best we could. He gave me the keys. We started up, man. I drove it on home, all the way from there. No driver's license or nothing. Then finally, when I got home, I was able to, a friend of mine had a vehicle I could borrow. So he kind of took me out and gave me some instructions on this and that or whatever. So I went to the police department. Try to get a driver's license. The first time I failed because I couldn't parallel park. I flunked that big time. So I'm thinking, I'll just go to another driver's license place. So I went to a different town, in Spartanburg, the little place, and went to another place. But I'm not thinking, I'm just stupid. They have computers, so my name pops up and you're supposed to wait so long in between tries getting your driver's license. Mine was like the next day or something. And I just told the guy straight up, man, I got a big job. I didn't tell him I was a wrestler, going to be a wrestler. And I got a big job in Louisiana, and I really need my driver's license, man. If you could help me out in any way, And, he said, okay, just run the course. So I ran the course a little bit. And he said, okay, here you go. He signed it off, man, and gave me my driver's license. So I was able to get the tags and, everything you need to make yourself legal. And, when time came, my starting date, I packed whatever little gimmicks I had, some dirty underwears or whatever, and headed to Louisiana, ended up in Louisiana, didn't know nobody, didn't know where to stay at, didn't know nothing. So I just pulled in a church parking lot. I'm like, man, I'll just sleep right here tonight. So middle of the night, bang, 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 bang on my window, it's policeman's. Shining a light in. What are you doing out here? I said, man, I'm just parked here to sleep. You can't be here, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know anybody to talk to. I didn't know nothing. So luckily I had Grizzly Smith's phone number. So, I contacted Grizzly Smith and, he come down and explain the situation. And then from then on, Bill gave me a little advance so I could get a little apartment, But that's the way I started down there. Great start, right? Policeman.
That's awesome.
Did you stay in Baton Rouge or Alexandria or Shreveport?
No, I was always in Baton Rouge.
Okay.
Yeah, I had just had a little apartment there, one of those kind of everything comes in it already, except maybe a TV set or whatever. But yeah, I had an apartment in Baton Rouge. So, from there, like I said, they showed those clips. He's like a one-man gang. And then Ernie Ladd was managing the Samoans off of Sika. So Skandar Akbar had bought their contract, unbeknownst to Ernie Ladd. So Ernie Ladd's doing his interview at the table, and Bill Watts is like, "Hey, man, what's going on up there with Akbar and your Samoans?" So Ernie Ladd enters the ring, and Akbar tells him, "I bought their contracts, blah, blah." He said, and they get into like an argument. And they all jump on Ernie. Then I come hit the ring. Then boom, we glom him, and they stretch him out. Stretch his leg out, over the bottom rope. I mount the ropes. I give him the big splash across his knee. Takes his knee out. They have to do operation. It's a work, but he was getting a real operation because of pro football. Because he had like 6 or 7 operations on his knees. But Bill took the cameras in the operating room. They filmed the operation and everything like that. So by then, I was already in the main events because of what I'd already previously done. I really didn't have to go through the steps of being on TV, step by step by step by step. Bill had already kind of got the name known by doing what I'd done previously, just those little clips. And then by, crippling Ernie Ladd, that was the biggest, the big part of it. And it was just, we was off and running all over the place.
So my question is going into it. So you said when you were at ICW, you thought, man, like this is it. I didn't really even know about other places. So what was it like then? Did you leave ICW because it was just time? Was it closing down at the time? What did you think about leaving? Like, now I'm going somewhere else. I'm going to Louisiana. I mean, was it a big deal for you to leave?
I wasn't forced out or anything, but it was all just I guess it was an agreement between, Angelo, Randy, whoever, and Mid-South that it was just time, I guess. I don't know if they agreed, said it's time for them to move on or whatever, but I had that opportunity, and they didn't try to hold you back at all, so
it wasn't.
That's how I ended up going to Mid-South and becoming
it wasn't time for you to leave, but it was time we saw a potential star. It's time for him to step up, upgrade, get with Watts, learn how to draw, learn how to make money, be a star. Then you'll go to the next big place.
Yeah, I was just, I still didn't know what was going on, man. I didn't know. I had no idea what was going on.
I mean, did you want to go? I mean,
sure. I mean, I didn't mind going.
Yeah.
But I mean, once I got there, I'm still just like, I don't know what's going on here. I'm just going in the ring, doing what I love to do. I'm like, they put me out there with Junkyard Dog. We're having riots and stuff like that. I'm like, holy crap, I never saw this in Spartanburg. We'd be in New Orleans, it'd be so crazy there with Junkyard Dog because, I mean, the building would be packed and man, Dog was so over in that area, and the people would be pushing into the ring. You have to fight your way out of it. I mean, I don't know how many times me and Akbar had to fight our way out of buildings. It was as crazy as could be. You get your tires slashed, get your windshield broke.
New Orleans was the most dangerous town.
Were you guys ever together there?
No,
No.
It was just the craziest thing I ever seen in my life. I never seen, you know what I'm saying? I knew, okay, I'm a heel, bad guy, but good gosh almighty, Akbar's used to it. He'd been in the business 100 years, I'd never seen nothing like that. ICW was never, like that, So
was JYD your biggest feud there?
No. Well, I had feuds with everybody, man. Yeah. I had Junkyard, I had Dick Murdoch, I had Dusty come in and out. I had later on Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So I mean, I was up and down. I was with everybody. We had tag team matches all around the area with different people. I got to be in my first Superdome. Here I am, a young kid that don't know nothing. Is me and Harley Race against Andre the Giant and Dick Murdoch. I'm like, good gosh almighty. This is crazy, man. Is the alarm going to go off and wake me up or something? I couldn't believe it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
See, I love hearing you say that because I'll ask Rip this kind of stuff and he won't put anything like that over to me. Like if I'm like, oh, you're in the ring with this guy or this many people or all this, he's like, it's all the same. I love hearing you say that.
Oh man, man, you gotta be kidding me. Every person I went in the ring with, that had a name, which mainly was a lot of guys, because I was pretty much in the main events almost every night. And here I am. I was a great. Bill Watts didn't know me from nobody. You know what I'm saying? But he took a chance on me, because of the word of Ernie Ladd. And luckily, I was able to hold up and do what needed to be done. But man, he just took a chance on me. I was nobody.
Give us your take on Bill Watts. Get any Bill Watts stories? How'd you like working for Bill? Obviously, you're probably appreciative that he took a chance on you, but
well, that's the main thing to me. I can't say nothing. He was hard. Now, don't get me wrong. He was a taskmaster, but you had to be at the building at a certain time and different things like that. He had to. Of course, you probably heard the rule: if you got in a bar fight, you better win or you're fired. Those type things. But you got to, later on, I just thought and said, man, you got to have rules like that because you're dealing with professional wrestlers. If you don't have set rules and some kind of consequence, if you're not at the building at a certain time, if you got to fine them or something, that one thing you hurt people with is take their money, So he would fine you if you're not there at a certain time or whatever. And the one guy that got in trouble a couple of times, I love the guy to death, was Iron Mike Sharp. We was at one of the buildings and they couldn't find Mike Sharp for his match. They come running in the dressing room. Where's Mike Sharp? He's supposed to be in the ring. Where's Mike Sharp? And somebody said, I don't know. I seen him go up to the top area up there. And Grizzly Smith went up there and Mike was up there doing squats or push-ups or something because that's all, when he got to a building, he would, get the jump rope out and do push-ups, do squats, and he didn't have no idea that it was time for him to go to the ring. So that's when they came out with, Bill came out with a memo saying no more exercising at the building. So, because he would disappear constantly, and his showers were like legendary. So
yeah, he'd have the 2 hour one time as a rib, we left him. Come back an hour later, and he was still in there and didn't miss a beat. He's still whistling and singing, and he got so much soap on him. I said, we come back to rib him, and the rib was on us. He still wasn't.
Yeah. That was constant. That's all the time. But nice guy, nicest guy in the world.
Yeah.
Stiff as can be, man. He'd hammer you in the ring now. He had that big boom,
Yeah.
He had the load.
Nice guy.
Yeah, the load. Shit.
Yeah. But my Mid-South days were, I loved them myself. I loved it, I was starting to really, making some money, which I actually was able to pay off the car from Gary Royal. I believe I paid it off. He never said anything about it.
I hope he doesn't watch this.
Yeah, I paid the car off, and so I was, doing great in Mid-South. And then one night, Bill comes to me and says, gang, it's time for you to leave. I'm like, I didn't understand. I'm still stupid. Yeah. Leave? What do you mean? He said, well, we've done, everything we can do with you right here except turn your baby face, and I'm not going to do that. But it's time for you to move on, blah, blah, blah. I'll get you a place to go to. So the one, the place he ends up sending me to is Memphis.
Oh, my gosh.
There you go. See,
what a shithole.
So I go to Memphis now. I pack everything up, blah blah blah, and then I end up going to Memphis. Now I'm moving around now, so end up in Memphis, and I can't go as one man gang there. They put me back as Crusher Broomfield because of the TVs, overlapping all those years on TV as Crusher Broomfield played in that area.
Oh, okay.
So Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee, they wanted to beat Crusher Broomfield because people didn't know, one man gang, they didn't know that. They knew Crusher Broomfield in that area.
So there wasn't cable TV with the Watts, but Crusher was over in the Memphis market, the Evansville market, the Louisville market, and the Lexington market from the ICW TVs, and that's where Jarrett ran.
Right. So I went back as Crusher Broomfield. Ain't nothing happened for me there, man. It was horrible. You know, I just wasn't a Memphis type guy. I didn't fit into their program, and they got a certain crew that they like to stick with, and I just didn't fit in with it. They teamed me up with Kamala too, which was Plowboy Frazier, who later become one of the hillbillies and whatever. But
Uncle Elmer.
just nothing was happening for me there. So I only stayed there maybe 2 months.
Wow.
And one of my
that's what I grew up
shows there-
watching. That Memphis was my wrestling. That besides, I mean, I watched ICW, but Memphis is what we got. Channel 3 wrestling. So that was my thing. So you guys kind of had that feud when you were in ICW. I call it a feud, whatever, with Memphis. Was there any of that kind of talk when you eventually made it to Memphis?
No, I didn't.
It was all done by then.
I'm just going to be honest with you. You know, I never really paid that much attention. Like I tell you, man, I didn't know anything what was going on. I'd get to the building when I was supposed to get to the building. I'd find me a corner, and I'd be sociable. You just you go around and say hello to guys, and how you doing, whatever. I'd find me a corner, put my gear on, and just stay out of it till I find out who I'm working, and we just decide what's going on, and that's basically was it. When the show was over with, I didn't hang out with nobody. I just get in my vehicle and head on back to wherever I lived at,
Yep.
That was just me. I didn't go out. I didn't go to no bars or anything like that. So
now, Crush, how long did you stay for Watts? Was you
Watts
about
was,
10
Watts
months
was
to a
only
year?
I stayed the first time there. I was only there about 8 months.
Okay.
8 to 9 months.
And because they accelerated you with all the stuff you did early.
Right. I didn't have to do all the squashes on TV. I could do all those little squash matches for 2 months or whatever. I didn't have to do all that, which was smart on Bill Watts' part,
Yeah, usually as a heel.
He made his own star, just by doing that,
That's wild.
But then in Memphis, I stayed there maybe a couple of months, worked, different guys, the fabulous ones, Stan Lane and Steve Kern, and worked those guys, worked, of course, Lawler, Dundee, a lot of different guys like that. And then my last night there, I was booked at some town. It's probably a couple hours away from where I lived at. So I get to the town. I can't remember who's running the show. I don't know, I don't know who's running these shows, but I'm in the dressing room and I'm getting dressed, getting my gear on, and whoever the promoter is, whoever he was, came to me and said, Crusher, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm booked here to work. And the guy, whoever he was, he says, no, you're not working tonight. And I said, luckily I kept the booking sheet. So I pulled the booking sheet and said, right there it says Crusher Broomfield. And he goes, I don't care what the booking sheet says, you're not working here. I don't know what his deal was. I'm not one of those kind of I'm not a violent, like I said, I'm not a tough guy. So, I'm not going to grab the guy up in a chokehold or nothing like that. So I said, I said, okay, whatever, man. So I just I get undressed, put my clothes back on, and I go out the back door to leave, and Coco Beware standing outside getting, out there because there's more room than the dressing room. It's one of them small dressing rooms. It's like 100 degrees inside of it, so he's outside where it's cooler. He asked me what happened, and I explained the situation. And he goes, man, they didn't give you no trans money or nothing? I said, no, I didn't get nothing, man. He said, hold on 1 second. So Coco goes inside just a few minutes. He comes back out and gives me a $20 bill. I don't know if he came out with it or if he actually got it, but he said, take this for trans money, man. And that was, I said, man, thanks a lot. So he gave me that. I never forgot that.
Wow.
That was
my last night.
Money.
Yeah,
that was his money.
Yeah, so? I'm sure it was.
Because he did something to somebody else with that too. I heard that story.
Yeah, and then the next day I called Bill Watts up. I told him what had happened, So Bill gave me his number, said, if you have any troubles, give me a call.
Mm-hmm.
So I called Bill back up. I explained to him what was going on, how I was being treated, and what happened at that show. And he said, hold on, just give me a few hours. I'll get back with you. So the time goes by, and he calls me back. He says, okay, man, pack your bags. I'm going to send you to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. I was like, yeah, man, that's my, yeah, exactly.
Going home, baby.
I'm going home, so I end up in Mid-Atlantic, but then at least I go back to one-man gang. I didn't have to be Crusher Broomfield. I get switched back to one-man gang, but at least I'm at home. I'm in Mid-Atlantic, what I grew up with. And that was like the greatest thing ever for me, That was unbelievable to be in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, going to these buildings, Asheville Civic Center, Charlotte, Coliseum, Greenville Memorial Auditorium, and people ask me, well, what's the best place you ever wrestled at? They all thinking I'm going to say Madison Square Garden or whatever, I tell them, man, Spartanburg, South Carolina, man, my home, man. That was the biggest thing ever for me, to walk through them back doors the guys used to go through, go in that dressing room, and be in the same dressing room with all them stars I used to pay $5 to go watch. I'm like, man, that was the biggest thing ever for me. But the catch is, the old saying, you can't go back home. So that's basically true. I went home, and you go to Spartanburg to wrestle, and you got all your school buddies and chums and things, they all know you now. So they all like, man, that ain't no one-man gang. That's George Gray. I know him. I grew up with him. We lived with next door neighbors with him. He ain't no one-man gang. So, I mean, that was the worst thing to me. I couldn't. Everybody, was your friend then. Yeah, you remember me? You sat beside me in this class or whatever. Yeah, whatever.
Where did you live when you went back to Mid-Atlantic?
I lived in Charlotte. Yeah. We lived in Charlotte because that's where TV was taped. Was in Charlotte. You do all your interviews up there and everything. So, yeah, I think just about it. I think everybody lived in Charlotte pretty much, unless they had a home somewhere in that area. But everybody lived there. So,
were any of the guys then that you grew up watching, were they still there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they were there, man. I got to team up with number one Paul Jones. I always loved Paul Jones. Got to my first, I had a lot of matches, but, Jimmy Valiant was there. I had a big run with Jimmy Valiant. I mean, he's like Jimmy Valiant. Come on, man. Valiant brothers from, New York and all that. What you talking about? Yeah. Had crazy Bugsy McGraw was there. Had, a lot of people may not know him, but I grew up watching him with Johnny Weaver. Man, I got in the ring with Johnny Weaver. I was like, man, this is Johnny Weaver. What are you talking about? The king of the sleeper holds, I said, please put that sleeper on me. That's awesome. But, I got to go over him. I'm like, man, he's crazy. I get to beat Johnny Weaver. His ass ain't real. And then one of my biggest, again, I ain't going to say my biggest match, but it was me and Greg Valentine against Ric Flair and Roddy Piper. I'm like, God dang, man. This is, it's like the, and this is only a few years after ICW. This ain't that, what I'm saying? This ain't that far down the road. And here I am already working against Ric Flair and Roddy Piper. I'm like, gosh, dang it, man. This can't be real, So and I'm starting to get a little better. I'm starting to pick up a little bit better. You know what I'm saying? I'm starting to cut a few interviews here and, and all that. I still had a manager. Everywhere I went, I had a manager. I had Akbar, I had Jim Cornette in Memphis. And then when I got to Mid-Atlantic, I was in the house of Humperdinck, Sir Oliver Humperdinck. So I was with him. So it was me, Dick Slater, I forget who else, but, that was the main core was 3 or 4 guys, the house of Humperdinck. So, but I had the big run with Jimmy Valiant was probably the biggest thing I did there. They put the Mid-Atlantic Tag Team titles on me and Kelly Kaninsky. But I have no idea why. They had a one-night tournament in Greenville, South Carolina, and I had no idea. I just thought, well, we'll just go up there and get beaten, go home. But we kept winning, and finally they said, okay, we're going to put the belts on you guys. So, the final match, we win the tag team titles. I'm like, what the heck? These are the Mid-Atlantic tag team titles, man. All the great people that's ever wore these, and now I get to, I'm one of them. I was like, God dang, so.
I got
Bob Orton Jr. was there also at that particular time. He was there. They had Big Angle, Sergeant Slaughter, and then Don Kernodle against Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. Those guys. They had the big Angle. We got to work against Jack and Jerry Briscoe. That was like a huge. I mean, like, man, this is Jack Briscoe. He's a former world champion. God dang, you know, I mean, things you just can't get over. I just can't. Even now, I'm like, I think about it and go, man, did that stuff really happen to me? You got to be kidding me. You got. Because people come up to signings and go, man, I remember we did this or did that. And I'm like, I did that. I just can't remember a lot of it. But
right. Well, it sounds like you remember a lot.
I'm just thinking, here I am in Mid-Atlantic, the same wrestling that I used to watch as a kid growing up, man.
So kind of a personal question. Was your mom still around at the time? Did she come and watch you wrestle? Was she?
Yeah. She was still alive at that particular time. And, yeah, she came to Spartanburg, she couldn't go to these other places, but she came to Spartanburg to watch, she didn't like watching me,
No.
I never smartened her up, to the business. So, I didn't smarten any of my friends or nothing, so, I tell everybody, man, what are you talking about? Yes, wrestling's real. What are you talking about? Look at my head. That's real right there, buddy. So yeah, in all these territories I went to, Mid-South, Memphis not as much, but Mid-Atlantic and every place else, they were all big blood, blood territories.
Yep.
Luckily I got pretty proficient with it, So as you can see on my head right through there, I quite a few nights of dropping the clarion out of my forehead. So.
Was WWF then after that, or?
Oh yeah, WWF was way after that.
No, I meant right after that.
No. After.
Were you guys ever together again after ICW? Like, did you cross paths at all anywhere? Did you?
Remember? I didn't. I ain't sure. Did you cut? Well, after that, unless you came to WWF for TV or something, but.
What about WCW? Like because you went to WCW, we'll get there. But
that was after.
But that was probably the '90s, though. Were you guys ever there?
I was going in for TV.
Oh yeah, you said you came to like Orlando or somewhere for.
Let's see, 90, 91, 92, 93, and 94 when Ole was there, and then Bill Watts was there. And then the lawyer was there, and then the pizza guy was there, and all the guys that didn't know nothing about wrestling.
Yeah, that wasn't in my time. So, actual territory wise, I don't think we ever crossed paths again at that.
That's pretty weird.
During that particular places. It's just strange. It's just strange. You'll see guys one time, and you may never see them again. So
yeah. Some guys I was in like the Cuban Assassin. I was with him in the Maritimes. I was with him in Calgary. I was with him in Kansas City, and in Puerto Rico, and in one more place. I can't think of where it was, but I was in 5 different territories with him, and it was just seemed like I was the same way with Rotten Ron Starr. It was the same way. Well, he was in Portland. He was in Kansas City. He was in working for Ron Fuller in Pensacola when I was there. He working for Ole when Ole took over the championship wrestling from Georgia thing. And we was out no matter, and in Puerto Rico, wherever he would go, I would go. It's like we was chasing each other or whatever. When I was leaving, he was coming in or like that. But that's just so funny. It's funny to listen to you because you're like a little kid again, reliving all these great times, talking about these great stars, names I haven't thought about in years. And I'm sitting here just listening and just fucking smiling because you love the wrestling business. And here you are, so humble, and you've been such a major star all over the world, and you still act like you're a nobody, which is fucking awesome.
Well, I was never, you know what? I never considered myself a major star. I never, to me, a major star is like Andre the Giant or a Wahoo McDaniel or a Terry Funk or somebody along them lines. Those are major stars. I just never considered myself that. Yeah, I was in the main events, quite a few times, but I just never, to me, it was just, I was the luckiest man in the world to be during this era. You know what I'm saying? During the time I was in it, I was the luckiest man in the world to be able to do that. I mean, it's just like it's basically like people say, it's your dream come true. it's like a kid dreaming to be an NFL player or whatever. You know, this was my dream, and it actually was happening, and still had more to come that I didn't even know about. So, yeah, I stayed in Mid Atlantic, and we ran a big angle where it was me against Jimmy Valiant. Well, me and Humperdinck against Jimmy Valiant inside of a steel cage. And if Jimmy Valiant loses, he had to leave Mid Atlantic. If I lost or Humperdinck lost, we had to get our hair cut. So that was one of my big blow off type matches. And matter of fact, the night that happened, we was in I think Richmond or Norfolk, but Harley Race I think was in against Flair. And we were booked over them, so we were the headline, and they were like underneath us. I was like, man, what are you crazy? You know, of course, I lost that. You know, they clipped some of my hair. I didn't have to shave my head. They clipped my hair and all that. But then just had a few matches after that. Worked Joe LeDuc and worked, a lot of them guys like that. I had a lot of matches, quite a few matches with Bob Orton Jr. while I was there, which was easy as a night. You know, all these guys were basically nights off. You know, if you work in Steamboat or Jay Youngblood and the guys in tag team matches, man, it's just so unbelievably easy. It's just pitiful. It's like stealing from the company, you know. But I was happy to do it. Give me, I'll steal from you, so put me in there every night. But yeah, it was easy. Same with Boogie Woogie Man. Jimmy Valiant was just so easy. You didn't have to do nothing. You know, he comes out for 5 minutes and dances around with the people and, shaking hands and doing all that. And then he hits the ring on you, gives you a few shots of this and that and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's just crazy it can be. Before you know it, it's almost over with. We either go to some kind of DQ, fighting on the outside or whatever it happened to be,
No violence tonight.
And then Bruiser Brody came in. He came in and did a little run, and Abdullah came in and did a little run. So I'm meeting all these guys, I'm like, dang, this is crazy as can be, and I'm at home Mid-Atlantic. It was unbelievable. That was one of my favorite times ever was, Mid-Atlantic time. So people they want to jump right to you, WWF, because that's what everybody remember, WWF,
Yeah, I mean, we'll get there, but I like all this other stuff. I'm 50 years old, so I grew up.
Yeah, I was a territory man. Most of my life was spent in territory, and that's what I love, man. You get in that car, drive to the town with a bunch of guys and just be BSing and booking the territory and talking about everybody in the world and just having a good old time. I didn't drink, so I'd end up being the wheelman, them guys that as soon as the show's over with, they want, they're going to start drinking, of course, just about everybody. I mean, everybody. But, I was the wheelman, and once they started having to stop and take a little leak, hey, can you pull over, then it's like every 20 minutes. It'd take you a half a night. It'd take you like all night to get back from some towns. But it was the greatest time ever. I'm like, man, I'm in the car with Jack and Jerry Briscoe, man. He's like drinking away, man. I said, throw your cans in the back seat. I had one in the front, and I think Jack was in the back. And I said, just throw your cans in the back there, man. By the time next day, I had to get a shovel to shovel them out. It was crazy. But that was great, man. Yeah, I mean, you get in the cars with these guys, and man, you'd be talking and playing country music, singing, and whatever. It was just crazy, crazy times.
The greatest time of your life.
I know.
You were a lot nicer. Rip wouldn't stop. He'd make people piss in a bottle or something. So you were...
Oh yeah, no, the wide mouth Gatorade bottle. Yeah.
I didn't want him to. If it was in my vehicle, I didn't want him pissing in my vehicle like that. Now
I didn't give a shit. I didn't give a shit. Working with Boogie Woogie, Marcus. No violence tonight. Okay, Jimmy. As soon as I'd walk out, I hit him over the head with a garbage can. He'd start selling on the floor. You had to get the nerve hold on, right?
Yeah, well, we was in Columbia one night. He almost knocked me out. We had like a New York street fight, because he's from New York. So we had a New York street fight. He took his cowboy boot off and swung it and hit me in the head, man. That thing about knocked me out. I was kind of on dizzy street there for about, 10 or 15 seconds. I was kind of wobbling around. I got him back though, man. I hammered the heck out of that dude,
Hey, we were in Puerto Rico in 1989, and they have a battle royal, but you bring weapons in there with you. It's the most stiffest thing. They beat the shit out of you. So Jimmy wants to partner. Hey, brother, me and you in the corner, do nothing. How about you? Huh? So I said, okay. As soon as the bell rang, I started beating the shit out of him. He goes, Marcus, what's the matter? What's the matter? I said, you scam me for that money at the fish stand in Indianapolis in 1977. Brother, I'll pay you. I'll double pay you. Just don't beat me up. It was funnier than shit.
Yeah, Boogeyman's classic. I've bumped into him at some signings every once in a while. He's still the same, he ain't changed one bit. He's still the same. So a little thinner, he's kind of trimmed up a little bit.
Vegetarian, brother. Vegetarian.
Yeah, vegetarian, exactly. But man, what a nice guy. All them guys are super guys, man. I didn't have trouble with nobody. People always say they had trouble with this guy or that guy. I had trouble with nobody, maybe because I just didn't, I just took, like I said, I kept to myself, I did what was asked of me, and there was no questions, okay, that's what you want, that's what you get, so I went out there, did the best I could every night with these guys, and, I guess it was good enough because they kept putting me in main events, so I guess I was okay, so.
Yeah, you sound like Rip because he was just on that interview with WSI, and it was the same thing. Rip basically got along with everybody and liked all the promoters for the most part, and everybody's like, there's got to be somebody you don't like. You've got to have controversy with somebody, but I mean, for the most part,
not really.
Always kind of said the same stuff.
Get in, get out, don't get hurt, have a good time. You're blessed to be in the wrestling business. You get to go up and down the roads, tell stories. You're in your 40s, you're in your early 50s, you're laughing, acting like a teenager. It's the world's greatest thing. And so what? The promoter screwed you. So what? You had a great time on the 4-hour car ride, the 4-hour back. You're talking shit, telling stories. And then you meet somebody. Well, I hadn't seen Scotty McGee in 10 years. Well, there's Art Cruz. I hadn't seen him for 8 years. And I'm working with somebody else. And you come in and you go right back to the old rats from the old towns in the old territories. What songs was playing, what angles was hot, what drew money, what didn't, who died, who got venereal disease, all the above.
Hey, about right. I didn't know that, about the promoters meshing you over. I didn't care, man. I was like, hey, I'm in the main event, wherever what do you want to pay me? $100? Okay, pay me $100. That's fine. I'm just wanting to wrestle. That's all I wanted to do.
Just want to be a wrestler.
Yeah, money came in later, but at that, I was getting paid, pretty decent. I'm sure, most of the guys are probably doing better, but hey, I was paying my bills. I was surviving, and being able to make like he said, being able to make all these trips to these different cities and towns and whatever, that's the greatest thing in the world. What are you talking about? I'm passing a dude out there in 100-degree temperature digging a ditch. Right. Here I am going to be a main event at some town down the road. I'm like, man, what are you talking about? But I left, man. I finally finished up in Mid-Atlantic. We did Mid-Atlantic pretty good. Like I said, I had a great time there. Loved it there. Wished I could have stayed forever. I was not one of the lucky ones that could land in one place. I was always one of those that kind of, moved around. I don't know if that means I was drizzling shits or what, but, I was always the big monster heel. They always wanted that big one, monster heel, so. And every territory brought in Andre. Mid-Atlantic brought in Andre. I got to work him there just like I did in Mid-South. So we already knew each other kind of, so it was a lot easier then. So
before you go on after Mid-Atlantic, give us something on Andre. I mean, if you've worked him and any Andre story, what was it like?
Oh, man. I'm going to just be honest with you. At that time, I was a pretty big dude. I was probably going 390, 400 pounds. And I'd go in the ring with Andre, and I'd feel like I was a little kid. I mean, honestly, that's size-wise, that's what I felt like, because his hand would just be, you've heard the stories, his hand was just gigantic. His whole body was gigantic, but, well, he could actually go, though. At that time, years later, he started slowing down, but at that time, man, he could go. He wanted to go out there and have a regular match. He didn't want to just have an Andre match, he wanted you to pound on him and stay on him. He'd go down and actually sell and get himself tied up in the ropes and different things like that, But we usually worked the DQ some way, It was never, very seldom would he, pin me or anything. So we usually worked a DQ with the manager or something like that. So, they'd always, one time a year, they'd bring him in for like a week, and we'd run the whole big shows, We did cage matches, and we'd have 6-man tags or, tag team matches. And then I'd have a couple single matches, because I was the big monster heel killing everybody. So, got to put a stop to this. Who's the one man that can do it? Andre the Giant. So, yeah, so that was, nice guy, man. Nicest guy in the world. Never had no problem.
Good to you?
Yeah, good to me always. Never had no problem. Then our years later at the big company. So then I ended up leaving Mid Atlantic and went back to Mid South. I was in Mid South for just Bill would always bring me back, but I didn't stay there long. It was maybe a 2-week little run, and he'd bring me in as a bounty hunter, against whatever the baby faces, because I already had the name built. He already had the name. So he'd bring me in bounty matches against Jim Duggan or whoever the baby faces were. I'd be like the bounty hunter. Skandor Akbar would be bringing me in. Just give me some money, payday here and there or whatever. Then from there, Dusty asked me, do I want to go to Florida? So, and I said, well, heck yeah, I'd go to Florida. So I packed everything up again, went to Florida Championship Wrestling, or Championship Wrestling from Florida, I guess they call it more, but I always just say Florida Wrestling. Man, that was a whole nother, what a vacation that was. I mean, you're in Florida. What are you talking about? People pay thousands of dollars to go there, Yeah. Here I am living. I'm living in Tampa, and I was as crazy as can be there. We had Blackjack Mulligan there, had Dusty Rhodes there, had Barry Windham, had Ron Bass, had Billy Jack Haynes was there, and man, it was I had a great run in Florida Champion. Superstar Billy Graham came in. That was the biggest time. Man, this is Superstar Billy Graham. Are you crazy? And so I was hooked up again with Humperdinck, House of Humperdinck, one more time. So
wow.
That's crazy. And then, when I first got there, my very first time in, they put me with J.J. Dillon. I was with J.J. Dillon. He didn't stay there too long. I don't know where he went to. Then they put me with this guy called Jim Holiday. Jim Holiday was my second manager. Then they put me with then they put me with Humperdinck. Then they put me with Sullivan. So I had like 4 different managers in Florida Championship Wrestling. So, but yeah, that was a great time. All them guys down there. Mike Graham. I mean, the whole crew was just spectacular. Spectacular, man. It was, every night was jam-packed, whether it was a big show or a spot show, man. They were doing big business at that time. Crazy.
Somebody had put on our YouTube, because we put that video out on Superstar Billy Graham. They said that he didn't have as much charisma as people had said. Like, he was compared, I think it was when we were talking about him and Hogan, kind of going, not having the same spot, but, after he had lost the WWF or WWF title, whatever. What do you think of Superstar Billy Graham? His charisma, his aura, was in person.
At that time, or when he was originally Superstar, or that time? By then,
I guess.
By this time, he was bald-headed and he was doing the karate stuff.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so it wasn't quite, it was still Superstar Billy Graham, don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't the same as before when he had the tie-dye and this and that, he still looked great now. He looked like $1 million, he always did, but yeah, to me, I can't say anything bad about, him or any of the guys. Like I said, our Blackjack Mulligan, man, I was like, when I got in the ring with him, I was same as anybody else. I was like, God dang, man, this is Blackjack Mulligan. What am I doing in the ring with Blackjack Mulligan? I could not get over,
Now, what year is this, Crush? What year is this? What year is this?
Oh, let me look at my notes real quick here. Sorry about that.
Oh, no.
Man, I went to so many places I couldn't keep up with it.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah. Okay, this is 1983. 83 and 4, somewhere 84, 83s.
Okay. In 85, I was in Tampa. I went into Tampa and I stayed like 5 months, and Wahoo was the boss. Dusty was gone. He was working as a booker for Crockett, right?
Right.
So I was doing real good down there. And then they had the big super shows because they would get some guys from Charlotte. And then they'd have the Tampa guys. And I remember when I come in and Mulligan they'd use him every once in a while, but we're working a match. I said, Jack, quit fucking selling so much. God damn. I said, you're Blackjack Mulligan. He says, no, I'm part-time and you're full-time. I said, fuck that. You're goddamn Blackjack fucking Mulligan. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't go for it. But that was funny. But no, I worked for the goddamn chief, and he was a hell of a guy. He was just like a normal guy, didn't take no shit. You'd work with him, and we're working TV, and I said, Chief, we're getting the roundups. Get off your fucking ass and start fucking dancing and beating the shit out of me. But he was great to be around.
Yeah. Do you have to take those Wahoo chops?
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh yeah, we got some on video.
Oh yeah. I love for him to chop me.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd say,
while I was in there, we did one of the. This is how it ended up me becoming Panama Gang. In June, Dusty was going to do the Orange Bowl, called Lords of the Ring or something, him against Flair. Yeah. So about maybe 3 weeks before that, me and Dusty was working on TV, booked a match, me and him on TV. So we had the big brawl, back and forth, back and forth. He ends up hitting me with a chair or something, and he ends up putting a figure 4 on me. You know, he's like, I can show Ric Flair. He's wanting to show Flair that he knows how to use the figure 4. So he puts the figure 4 on me, but once I give up, he won't break it. He continues to hold it. He won't release the figure 4. Keeps holding it. Guys start hitting the ring. Had to basically pull him off. Dusty's doing the promo about, see, you're a nature boy. I know how to do the figure 4 too, and come to Orange Bowl, blah, 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 blah. So they show that, I'm grabbing my knee, holding my knee and everything, and they wheel me out of there, roll me out like a big whale, roll me out of the ring. They got this little, cot thing, and they put me on the cot and carry me out, so I come back, Dusty says, I don't want you being out of action, so go find yourself some yellow Bermuda shorts and whatever, and like a gimmick shirt. Put yourself a little hat, Panama hat, and I'm gonna, make you a manager and call you Panama Gang. So I had the gimmick knee thing on, and I came back out with the cane. And, I started managing Black Bart. He called me, his Panama Gang. So I was, being a heel manager. So, and 3 weeks later, 3 or 4 weeks later, when they went to the Orange Bowl, then I'm back as one-man gang. I was healed up. So they brought me back as one-man gang. I got to work, Jerry Lawler, at the, big show. So that's how I became Panama Gang for that short little amount of time. Not many people remember that. I've had a few people come up and mention, hey, man, I remember you as Panama Gang or something, but that's just not one of my gimmicks that really stuck around too long.
When did the hair start, the mohawk? Was that always in play as the one-man gang?
No, I had the long hair. I still had the long hair like I had in ICW. All this time was still long hair. And
I'm trying to think back of pictures now. Yeah.
Yeah, the Mohawk started in World Class Championship Wrestling in Texas.
Oh, was it?
That was when the Mohawk started. But I still had the long hair in Florida. So what happened in Florida was Dusty was getting ready to leave, wherever he was going. I think he was going to Charlotte maybe or somewhere. But a little bit prior to that, they started having some friction with the House of Humperdinck, against the House of Humperdinck on interviews, and like we'd be cutting the interview and I'd be going to say something, and Humperdinck would pull the microphone away, and be like, nobody wants to hear what you got to say, one man gang, just give me that microphone, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
So we're in Lakeland, Florida, me against Dusty And we're in a Texas death match, which is, in case people all know, that's falls don't count. You basically can have one fall or 100 falls. You pin the guy, and then you get a 10 count to try to beat the count back up. So I don't know how many falls we'd split, maybe, 8 or 9 falls, or 10 falls. Then we had the big double knockout. Dusty went to the floor. I stayed in the ring with the knockout. So the referee's counting. Humperdinck jumps up and starts waving, troops in, which is Superstar, Billy Graham, Ron Bass, and Black Bart. Starts waving them in, and the people thinking they're waving them in to jump on Dusty. So he's waving the troops in, and I start making my way up to get up, and when the troops hit, Humperdinck points at me, and they jump me instead of Dusty. They jump on me, boom, 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 boom. They whole stretch me out. Ron Bass comes off the turnbuckle with the cowboy boot, and I get a little gimmick going, and go down, and they put the boots to me, and Dusty finally makes his way back in with a chair and chases him out of the ring. I'm in the ring all, gimmicked up, shaking or whatever. And Dusty starts getting the people, get up, get up, get up, starts chanting. You got, I don't know how many thousands of people in the Lakeland Civic Center, get up, get up, get up. So the people was like, get up, So I finally pulled myself up rope by rope by rope. Then when I stood up, I fall into Dusty's arms, and he holds me up like that, and he's like, all people cheer and all that. So we leave, and they had the cameras in the back. They follow me out. I go to my dressing room. I try to get in the door, and they slam the door on me. They throw all my gear out. They throw my gear, everything I had, they throw out the door with the door shut, and I'm pounding on the door, let me in, let me in, and they like, get away from here, you're a loser, you're a turncoat, blah, blah, blah. So they show me picking up my gear like a sad little child or something and wandering off down the hallway to who knows where, So after that, I wasn't affiliated with the bad guys. I wasn't affiliated with the good guys. I was down kind of in the middle. So, my dressing room could be anywhere. They might put me in a janitor's closet or something. But during matches, Ron Bass might be against somebody or Black Bart or whoever happened to be against somebody, and they'd give me the spot. Whatever the spot was, I would just come out, just walk from the back, just stomp through the people and stomp over the railing, jump in the ring, and start cleaning house on whoever the heel was. Boom, 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 boom. And the people, back in those days, they'd give you the like, whoom, 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 the whole crowd's like with you. So I did that 3 or 4 times, and then finally on TV, I went to Dusty and said, Dusty, I need you as a partner. I need a tag team partner, and then Dusty was like, hey, I can't do the Dusty Rhodes voice, but he was like, I don't know if I can trust you, one man gang, blah, blah, blah. He's giving that Dusty Rhodes spiel, He said, I'll give you one match. He said, if you turn on me, that's going to be the end of it. You're going to have to pay the penalty and blah, 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 that Dusty Rhodes stuff. So it ends up me and him teaming up against Superstar Billy Graham and Ron Bass. So it was a tag team match at the Eddie Graham Sports Center in Orlando. So we teamed up. We go out there. People, this is a hot match. People's into it, man. Every time I threw a punch, the whole crowd's like, woo, woo, woo. I never seen, I've always been a heel. My whole life was a heel. And of course, Dusty was doing his Dusty stuff. And he said, call me in there. And then I got to do some Dusty stuff, and stuff like that. So the finish was Dusty gave the elbow to Superstar Graham. He goes down, and I threw Dusty. Well, Dusty hit the ropes, and I scooped him up for a slam. And you could feel the people in the crowd. They went, oh, no, man, this can't be. They thought I was going to slam Dusty, right? Yeah. But instead, I just dropped Dusty on top of him, splash. Got the 1, 2, 3. The people explode, and yeah. That's awesome. that was pretty cool thing, And Dusty told me, he said, man, ride this as far as you can, man. Ride it till it drops. I said, yeah, okay. I still, I'm still like I was in ICW. I don't know what's going on. I'm like, yeah.
Rip, you could probably do the Dusty impersonation and telling him not to turn on him. And that's the last
Well, big man, Cruther Broomfield, when I'm talking to you, I was talking with Cody, my son Cody. I was talking with the wife. I was talking about trust is what you got in professional wrestling. If you don't have communication, if you don't have trust, you ain't got nothing. And I've known you for a long time, and you're a tough, tough guy. But the mental aspect of professional wrestling, of when to be good, when to be evil, I don't know if you figured all that out yet. The dream has got it. The dream will help you. But Cruther Broomfield, you got to look at yourself in the mirror. Closely look in that mirror and ask yourself, am I going to be with the dream? Am I going to be with the dream? Or am I going to give him less than my best effort? Well, I looked up and I prayed to Jesus right there. And I said, one time, Cruther Broomfield, one time and one time only. I'll give you one chance only. I, Dusty Rhodes, will give you my all. I'll give you 100% of my effort, my mental capacities as a tag team. And I know if you give me the same, we will be victorious. So it's all up to you.
Is that how it was?
Hey, dang, that was better than the promo Dusty did. What are you talking?
That was classic.
But yeah, that's when I turned babyface full time. So,
did you like it for that night being babyface, or did you like it like for a while after that?
Oh, for that night it was great. After that, I hated it.
Oh, did you?
It's easy to be a heel. You can have people hate you. You can get people to hate you easy.
Yeah.
Man, being a babyface is hard, man. It's hard work, man. You always got to be like, up with the people and fighting and doing your comeback. I'd blow up every night being a babyface. I hated it. I couldn't stand it, man. The heel, all you got to do is yell a couple of times at somebody at ringside or do whatever. Choke somebody, you got their, they're going crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I thought babyface would be all right, but man, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, but yeah, I was babyface now.
Where'd you go next? We better go to the next place. Where was?
Yeah. Well, okay. I went to after that. Well, even before that, I'd made a tour of Japan. I got to team up with Bruiser Brody over there. I got to team up with Stan Hansen while I was in Japan. So I'd went a 5-week tour with them guys. Now I was finishing up. Well, I didn't even know I was finishing up, but I had another tour of Japan. So I went to Japan again. Went over there for 4 weeks. When I get back from Japan, I'm back in Florida, and Michael Hayes has come in, and whoever else, I don't know who else came in. But I went to Michael, and I said, Mike, when's my starting date? When I'm going to start back? And he kind of looks at me a little crazy and said, you're not starting back. And I was like, what? He said, I didn't even know you was here. So I didn't put you in the book, I said, what are you talking about? You didn't know I was here. You had to know I was here. He says, no, I didn't know. He said, but I'll help you out. I can help you out. I always had, a pretty good relationship with the Freebirds. So he said, I'll give a call to Texas. So he called over to World Class, and talked to Ken Mantell. He was over there running things at that time for Fritz. And he said, yeah, give him a call. So I called him up, and he said, yeah, we're looking for a nice heel. So that was my way into World Class Championship Wrestling. So I packed up again, made my way across the country, made it over to Texas. On the way in, I stopped and, had a few Mid-South matches to pick up a few extra paydays, and made myself on into World Class Championship Wrestling. That's when I showed up there with the mohawk. I'd shaved my hair and I had the mohawk. Didn't have the jacket or nothing yet, but I had the mohawk. And they put me with Playboy Gary Hart. So my first time in, they said, we need you to come down to Sportatorium early. So I went down to the Sportatorium, and there's a man standing over there, and he had a jumpsuit on, kind of like you see a guy that works on cars and stuff, a mechanic, one of those one-piece jumpsuits. And he's walking around the Sportatorium or whatever. And somebody comes to me and says, you need to go to the office back here. I went to the office back, and sitting behind the desk is Fritz Von Erich, and it's the same guy I thought was a janitor or something who was standing off to the side. I thought he was a janitor, so I went up there. He was sitting behind his desk. I shook his hand. He has that real rough voice, Hey, well, I hear you coming in. You're going to be possibly working my boys, huh? I was like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I hope so. And he said, if you take care of my boys, I'll take care of you. I said, oh, well, great. I don't know what to say. What am I supposed to say? No, I'll beat the crap out of them, or something. Yeah. So anyway, but they did. They took care of me, so I ended up a Playboy. But the rest of it, Texas wrestling, it's all wild and crazy and woolly, just like every other place I went to, man. Blood and guts every night. Beating the crap out of each other every night, It was just a bar fight almost every night. I mean, legitimately, when you went out there with them boys, it was like a fight. I mean, it was like if you didn't fight them back, you would be eat up and swallowed. You wouldn't have nothing. You had to fight back. I mean, I learned that quick, real quick. So, but that place was crazy, man. That was another crazy place, just Texas people, Texas fans, they wanted it so rough and tough. Man, you had to be snug, stiff. I mean, past snug, it was pretty stiff, really. That was one of the places there I'd probably been kicked harder than any. Bruiser Brody kicked me one night with that running boot he has. That boot he gives you, man, he hit me so hard, about spun my head around, It was like, God dang. And I pounded him right back, though. I hit him right back. He went down to one knee. So, I don't know.
Did you guys get along?
Yeah, I've done learned, man, you got to fight these dudes.
How were you and Brody like in the back? You guys get along all right?
Oh, man, super, super.
Yep.
Because we'd spent a lot of time in Japan together in places, So, yeah, it was no problem at all with Bruiser. Not at all. I've heard a lot of people, say things about him being hard to work with or whatever, but nothing like that with me. No problems at all. No problems with any of the guys. I'll just be honest, man. That's why people don't want to, they don't like me doing these talks because I have nothing negative to say. I mean, I had a great time with everybody I worked with. I didn't have no problems with anybody. I loved every night I got to go to the ring was just a pleasure. I didn't care if I come out with a busted nose, a lip, whatever. I didn't care. I just loved it.
I don't mind you saying that you got along with them. That's fine. I just want to know like kind of what they're like in the back. Rip gives the same answer.
I can only give you my experience. Now other guys may say something totally different.
With you. Yeah.
My experience in the ring with guys like Brody and Hanson and stuff, but I had no problems. I'm not saying they wasn't stiff. Now these guys was stiff. They'd beat the crap out of you in a second. There ain't no problem with that. But you fight them back and, give them a good match and everything else is fine. Same with the boys, Kerry and, Kevin and them guys. I mean, they gonna get their stuff, but if you fight them back, everything's good with them, They respect that.
Give him your Stan Hansen story didn't you race his
Oh, I was going down to work for Ole and I was real tight with Ole. And I used to run WCW developmental towns, spot shows in Indiana and some parts of Kentucky. And Ole had put the TV up and it had Rip Rogers against Stan Hansen. I looked at that and I said, Ole, come here. He come over there. I scribbled Stan Hansen's name out and wrote Ole Anderson.
So you scribbled your name out.
Yeah, and put Ole Anderson's name in there. That he was going to work against Hansen. So I said, I ain't getting in there with him. I said, he might hurt you because he was fucking blind and he might he was a stud and he'd hit you hard. He'd look at you. He couldn't hardly see you and everything. I said, hell no.
Well, I was the same way. I had bad vision too.
Right.
I had real bad vision. That's why I never could. I didn't trust myself to do turnbuckle stuff. I couldn't do dives off the turnbuckle and different things like that because I couldn't judge the distance. I couldn't tell. I didn't want to fall on somebody and just completely kill them, So
right.
I tried to stay everything grounded as much as possible. But here's a Japan with Bruiser Brody. Him and I are teaming up against a couple of Japanese guys on TV. And it's one of my first times going out over there. And Bruiser tells me, just follow me, whatever, just follow me. So that music comes on. He's got his chain. He's throwing that chain around. You can't really see too much, because they kind of hit you with a spotlight.
Yeah.
People, he's going through there like Godzilla, man. People are just spreading out all over the place. I get in the ring, And I look around and there's no Bruiser Brody. I look up in the stands and the chairs, you know, in the stands, and he's walking through the stands, you know, hitting people with the chain and kicking people and stuff, you know. I'm like, oh my God, what have I gotten into? And he makes his way back to the ring, you know, and these Japanese guys, man, they didn't know me from nobody, so every one of them's wanting to suplex me. I don't know what the deal, you know, suplex the big guy. So, you know, with that waist kind of suplex they want to do. So all night long, I'm just fighting these guys, trying not to get suplexed. And so Brody gets in there. He says, watch this. This is what you need to do. So he takes one of them kids. He takes the kid and throws him in. I don't even know if he caught it, but he drop kicked this kid, man. He drop kicked him. That kid's head, I thought, was going to go into the stand somewhere. He kicked him so hard. He come over and tagged me and said, that's what you need to do right there. So I was like, oh, okay. But from then on, man, I was just beating them dudes up. I beat them up, you know. He said, you have to, you know. This is back, you know, you got to remember, this is in the 80s. This ain't modern day, you know. So yeah. Then here's my Stan Hansen, Japan. In Japan, I team up with Stan Hansen for the tag team tournaments. So we're in this gymnasium, and they always put these mats on the floor to protect the gymnasiums. And as you walk out the door, there's a little bitty, you know, where the mat is, you know, might be a little bit that far off the floor, you know. So as you step out, you got to, you know, kind of go through that. So both of us have bad visions. I make the step right. Stan goes out first. And he just hits that little thing on the toe of his boot and falls straight on his face, you know, and I step right over him. I said, you come into the ring or what? And he jumps up all crazy with that lariat. You son of a bitch. He starts hitting people. He just fell straight on his face.
That is awesome.
I mean, you imagine the honor of getting teamed up with Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen in Japan. I mean, that's like, you know, I mean, that's the biggest thing ever. I mean, at that particular time, they were like gods over there, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they were making, I don't know what they were making, $50,000 a week or something. It was just insane money.
They were over.
I wasn't making that, but
they were over so much. And you know, in Japan, it was taboo. Like if you worked for Baba, you stayed with Baba. You didn't switch back and forth like to go Baba to Inoki and Brody. They were going back and forth. It seemed like all the time and just getting more raises, and nobody said a word because
exactly.
They drew.
Whoever gave them the most money, that's who they went to.
Yeah. Because
nobody said nothing to them, you know.
Right. Uh-huh.
You know, I stayed with Baba. That's who I was with. You know, I was with Baba the whole time. So, you know, I was never offered any other. I wasn't offered a raise or anything. So I had to stay with Baba.
Yeah.
But yeah, Japan was a whole nother world to me, man. That was like, man, I didn't like it at all, to be honest. I liked the guys. I was over there with some nice guys, you know, good guys, American guys. But man, I didn't like it was pretty backwards at that time, you know. It wasn't modern, you know. You go to some of them old, smaller little towns, you'd be sleeping on rice mats, and you know, the pillows that had to be filled with rice and stuff. You wouldn't even have like a real pillow. You had to pay TV. You'd have to put a little yen in to watch the TV or something. It was like, God dang. Oh, wow. That was like a whole nother culture shock for me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't fit in the taxi cabs. They were so small. You know, they'd be all talking about you. You know, they're talking about you too. You know, but I survived. I win at least. You know, it wasn't something I made a career out of, but it was kind of hard at that time. You know, you wanted to be a territory man and then go back and forth to Japan. You know, the territories didn't care too much for that. They wanted you there if you was a territory man. They didn't want you going in and out all the time. So I kind of stayed in the States more than I went to Japan. So. Might have been a bad decision. I don't know.
Well, Japan, the Japan loved those big guys.
Oh yeah. That was
so size conscious there.
Yeah, exactly. At that time, it was big guys for sure.
So where'd you go after Japan then?
Well, I was during World Class. I was after World Class. When I say World Class, I went back to Japan again after World Class. Made another tour. Then I went back to World Class. Then I ended up back over for Bill, but he had changed to UWF, Universal Wrestling Federation. He's trying to up his game a little bit, you know, instead of just Mid-South. He wanted to be like, go to California, go on the East Coast, you know, which was disastrous. You know, when he left his own area, it was disastrous. He should have stayed in his own backyard, basically. But they ended up giving me the world title. You know, Terry Gordy was the world champion. Then he supposedly worked the angle where he got injured in the cage or something and hurt his arm. Couldn't work that night. I was booked against him, and if he couldn't defend the title, it was going to be given to me by four, you know, just be given to me, you know. So I ended up being the world champion. So I was UWF world champion. So, you know, did that for a while, you know, a year or so. Then I get a call from Ernie Ladd, and Ernie Ladd's like, man, Vince McMahon wants to speak to you. And I was like, yeah, really? I didn't know. I didn't know nothing about WWF. I didn't know. You know, I just didn't care. I didn't keep up with that kind of stuff.
Still, after all this time, it was never on your radar? Like,
no. I was world champion. I didn't need, hey, I was the world champion, baby. What are you talking about? Yeah. No, I wasn't on, I wasn't on my radar at all. You know, I was just, like I said, I was happy doing where I was at. I was, you know, having them fights every night with different guys. I love that. So then Ernie calls me, you know, and says, you know, Vince McMahon really wants to speak to you, you know. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I let it go for a couple, 3 weeks. Then finally, he finally got me and said, you know, he really wants to speak to you. You want to, you know, can I set it up? And I said, yeah, go ahead. Set up a telephone call. So just a few minutes later, Vince calls me up, you know, and got his Vince McMahon voice, and you know, like George, this is George, this is me. He said, I sure would like to have a meeting with you. Is there any chance for you to be able to fly up here? And I said, well, I'm booked right now, you know, for the next few days. I mean, then I have a couple of days off. And he said, well, if you just give me the dates, I'll fly you and your wife up here. I would love to have a meeting with you at the office. So we said it. It was set up. I flew up there. You know, like some guys say they had tryouts or whatever. I didn't have nothing like that. I flew up there. They picked us up in a limousine, took us to the, you know, headquarters, and I went in and had a meeting with Vince, you know, and he's like, you know, he introduced me to Pat Patterson. This is Pat Patterson, blah, blah, blah. And then he said, you know, I'd like to have you as one of my wrestlers. And he took me in his office and he goes, you know, I love that name, One Man Gang. I won't change that at all. I won't touch it, you know, which of course we saw that didn't last. But he said, I can see it on the marquee, One Man Gang, blah, blah, blah. You know, and he says, you know, who our world champion is here is Hulk Hogan, and I'm always looking for guys, you know, to come in and go against him for the world title. And he says, I believe you fit right in that perfectly, you know. And he says, well, how much do you make for UWF, you know, down there? I told him, I said, I make 100,000, which I wasn't making no 100,000, but I told him 100,000. And he goes, I guarantee you'll make a lot more than that. And I was like, okay, I'm thinking in my head. Oh, yeah, when I first got there, I had these gig marks all over my head. He saw that. He said, you won't have to worry about that no more. We don't do that here, you know. So nice. He said, well, what do you think? You know, he said, I'll give you an opportunity. I'm not going to make you any promises about anything, but I'll give you the opportunity. Would you like to join the World Wrestling Federation? And I said, well, I said, yeah. I shook his hand. I said, you bought yourself a wrestler. That's what I said. You bought yourself a wrestler. So he said, okay, go back and, you know, finish up, do what you got to do. So I went back. I told Bill, you know, and he told me to go. He said he had no hard feelings about it at all. And I ended up having to drop the world title to Bubba Rogers, who later became Big Boss Man. Ain't that strange? Yeah. But I called Vince about it. I said, Vince, they want me to drop the title, you know, to do all this, and what you want me to do? He said, just do it. Do what they want you to do. Nobody remember nothing. They don't care. Nobody remember it. So I said, okay. So I dropped the title to him, you know, and finished up whatever few matches I had left over. And next thing I knew, I was on the big jet headed to New York City. and the rest is history after that with the WWF.
So you had I mean, all the other places you were saying, man, I can't believe I'm in the ring with this guy, this guy, this guy. What was it like then meeting Vince? I mean, was it still that
It wasn't that
unbelievable?
big a deal to me. I just be
No?
honest with you. To me, I didn't even realize who Vince McMahon was. That's how in the dark I was about business. I'm not a businessman. I don't care about what goes on behind the scenes. I don't know what's going on. I get my booking sheet, whatever town I was booked at, that's where I went to. I couldn't tell you nothing about nobody. So, I understood he ran the company or something, but I didn't really understand what he was or what went on or nothing about the company at all. So, until I got there and understood what went on, it was just a whole another world I didn't even understand. Once I got there, that was another whole another world I had to relearn, basically.
Elaborate on that.
Well, when you got there, man, you got in the ring, and everybody was like, they didn't want to be touched. It was like, I was coming from all these territories that was pretty snug,
Yeah.
maybe even stiff. But I get to WWF, man, them guys want to be so soft with each other. It was just, crazy. You know what I'm saying? They kept the one-man gang gimmick, and they did a lot of things with me, but they wouldn't let me use the splash. They wanted to change the splash, so Vince comes up with his forward suplex where you pick the guy up, but you drop him forward on his stomach instead of backwards on his back. I had to pick him up and hold him and then drop him forward to the stomach, and I hated it every time I had to do it, man. I just felt so awkward doing it. Splash is so easy because you can hit it anywhere, man. You can splash anybody.
Right.
Just like a stunner or a DDT. You can give it to anybody anytime during a match, But man, that forward splash was just so awkward, But I can't go to Vince and tell him, man, I hate this thing, man. Let me do something else. So I stuck with that. They let me take out some referees, and things which they never, people never really got to do too much in the WWF before. So I got to hammer a couple of referees and things like that. So they built me up pretty good. So to get me ready for Hogan, it's one of those kind of things where they tell you to keep your tights clean, and that means don't go down. We're saving you for the big guy to go down,
So when they wouldn't let you use the splash, was somebody else using it, or he just didn't think it was like
devastating? I don't believe he really. Well, they eventually let me go back to it, but I just don't think he cared too much for it. I don't think he wanted something a little more visually impactful, maybe. I'm not sure. I didn't question it. He just came up with the idea, said, "Can you do this front suplex?" And I just said, "Yeah, I'll do it." If the guy go up with me properly, I can get it. But that was about it. So I didn't question too many things.
Savage was there, right? You worked with Savage. What was it like coming back full circle with Savage at WWF? Like, did he act like did you guys know each other?
Oh, of course. He right away he called me Crusher. Just like Rip does that. It was Crusher. It wasn't one man gang, he called me Crusher.
Yeah.
And Vince would never call me by my gimmick name, it was always George. Every time he speak, George, and then Savage was always Crusher. So they put me with Slick, the Doctor of Style, as my manager, so we took off, man. We worked everybody, man. You could go up and down the roster of who they had there at that time, pretty much everybody off and on at different times.
So were you still like starstruck, to say the least? Like Hogan, being in the ring with Hogan and those guys?
I didn't care one bit. I wasn't starstruck at all.
Well, whatever you want to call it. Like when you were in the ring with like Blackjack, some of those other guys you were saying.
No, because I didn't grow up watching Hogan.
So now that, okay, all right.
I mean, Hogan to me was just another wrestler, but it wasn't the same as these other guys from Mid-Atlantic because I didn't grow up watching him. He was. So it wasn't the same situation.
That's awesome.
It was a difference. I mean, yeah, he's the top man on the totem pole now. But to me, let's just have a good match and go on about our business. That's all I wanted to do. That's all it was, night after night after night. Match after match. So luckily, I got in the spot that people was begging to get into, So, I was just a lucky person again. Just luck, just happened to be because of the big cat, Ernie Ladd. Once again, you know, put me in that position again, which you've done, brought me into Mid South, and now he brought me, helped me get into that spot. So a lot of times that's just how it is. People help you out that way if you're a halfway decent person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you could give yourself a little credit. I mean, you.
And maybe, I mean, we don't know. We don't know what history would have had. We don't know if I would have made it or not. I had a choice between that or stayed with UWF, but the Crockett's were buying UWF out, which didn't make any sense at all. Why do you want to buy that out? It don't make no sense. So I could have stayed with that, or I had the choice of going to WWF. But I mean, come on, that's just who. Like you say, I knew right away I better go on to WWF. Not knowing, I had no idea, what was going to happen there. But
So I'm not looking for a specifics here, but did Vince hold true to his promise saying you'll make a lot more than 100,000?
Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, quite a few over that. I'll admit that much.
Because I think you were in like the first like Survivor Series, I think, weren't you?
I was in the very first. Well, the very first one was a live TV event. We were in, I think, Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and they actually telecast it live on TV. But yeah, I was in the very first one, and the last two in the ring was myself and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And,
that was the Royal Rumble, I think.
Yeah, that's the Royal Rumble,
yeah.
Right. And then Duggan pulled the rope on me, and I took the bump over, and Duggan won that one. Actual first, yeah, that was like the first one. The first one they actually did was never televised. It was done in St. Louis, and I won it.
Oh, okay.
So they was doing just a test. Pat Patterson didn't want to run a little test, so they did one on a house show that people don't even really remember, but I won it. Then they did the televised one where they was doing it like it would actually be done on the pay-per-view, and Jim Duggan won that one. And after that, it became a regular pay-per-view event.
And I think then the first Survivor Series, I think you were with like Andre's team against Hogan and I think Savage and those guys.
Right. Well, let me think. It was me, Andre, Rick Rude, and Bundy, King Kong Bundy. If I'm not mistaken, and we took on Hogan. I think maybe, I ain't sure, was Savage in it? I'm not sure. Yeah, I forget who the baby faces were, but maybe Bam Bam Bigelow. I'm not sure. But anyway, our team won. We ended up winning, but that's crazy as all. Like I say, some of that stuff's just so insane. I'm like, I can't believe it even was going on. I'm like, I'm still just an ICW little kid. I don't know, man. I'm serious. I was just couldn't believe what was going on, even with all this, getting paychecks from all this place and all that, and everything I went through and places I've been all around the world. And man, I still couldn't believe
yourself there, or did you see any of the Hogan and Savage confrontation that supposedly happened kind of during that?
No, I never saw any of the confrontation. I mean, we were, myself and Big Boss Man, when we became Twin Towers, we were lucky enough to win. We had the live NBC match against him and Hogan and Savage, the Mega Powers. We had the match where we got to break them up, So what was going to happen was, this is one of the few times Elizabeth was going to take a bump. I was going to have to throw Randy through the ropes, and Randy was going to land on Miss Elizabeth. They wanted Big Boss Man to do it, and Randy wouldn't let him. He said, "No, I'll let Crusher do it." So I guess because he trusted me, I don't know. But anyway, ended up I threw him out, and he took the big bump on Miss Elizabeth, and that's when Hogan takes Miss Elizabeth to the back, and we continued to beat on him and beat on him and beat on him, And during the live match, that's when I basically almost killed myself. I fell through the rope. I don't know what, me and Boss Man was hitting the ropes at the same time to do something. And then Boss Man, I don't know if he took the rope away, but I slipped through the middle rope and went flat on my back. My head hit the concrete, and I was kind of dizzy, I was kind of like this, and slick running around the corner. hey, gang, you got to get up, man. This is live TV. And I kind of came to, and I said, dang, this is live TV. So I pulled myself back up, made it back into the ring, was able to finish, If it'd be modern days, they probably would have pulled me out and sent me to the back, but at that time you couldn't do, well, you know what it was like at that time. You just had to go on about your business. But I probably ended up having, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 maybe matches with Hogan over the time period, all around the whole circuit, I mean, big towns, it wouldn't, so I got the main event, the Garden with him. I got the, Boston Gardens, Philadelphia, Meadowlands, and all those places. Every one of those, we set the attendance record at the Montreal Forum. So, we held that for a long time, which is probably broken now. But, I say we, it's really him. He could have been out there with anybody, but I just happened to be the one against him. So I can say we.
I would keep saying we. I would say I.
Yeah.
When I think back and I think, man, that's a long way from ICW. You know what I'm saying? I mean, a long way from any, even back from Spartanburg days and all that. I'm like, man, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a Savage story. This is one of them. This ain't a bad one, but we was on a jet going to city to city, which was every day basically. And the plane was full. Randy was in the back with us. This is before he's world champion. World champion get first class. And Andre got first class, and DiBiase got first class because of his gimmick. The rest of us is squashed in the back, unless you get an upgrade. But Randy was in the back. Miss Elizabeth was in the back. This plane was packed. I'm sitting on the aisle seat with two businessmen beside of me. I always try to get the aisle so I can lean way out like this because there's always, 400 pounds and them seats just don't fit. So Randy's looking around, and he goes to these two business guys, in his Macho Man voice, asking would they mind switching seats with Miss Elizabeth and him. Because he was going to put Miss Elizabeth in the middle seat. Randy was going to be on the aisle, and somebody else was going to be on the other side of Miss Elizabeth. And he didn't want that. So Randy got those two businessmen to change seats, and he moved over there. Randy moved over there and put me at the window, Miss Elizabeth in the middle, and Randy took the aisle seat. And it was like, I guess he trusted me, that I wouldn't try to get a feel or anything, So, but he was protective, he, like they say, he was protective of her at that time. And who can blame him, man? Look at these guys you got hanging around. I'd be protective too, So. Like I said, I didn't have no problem with him. People talk about how crazy he was or whatever. I had a lot of matches with him when he became world champion. I don't know if he may have went to Vince and, asked to work with me. I don't know if he did or not, but I had a lot of matches with him again as his world champion. And never once, we may set the finish up, but other than that, everything was just, even when it was on Saturday Night Main Event. We worked the Saturday Night Main Event, and we didn't set nothing up. It was just whatever happened. We played it by ear.
That's wild. Just like you said. I mean, you guys are ICW together, and then main eventing WWF years later. That's
exactly. It's crazy. Yeah,
it is
we went did their first international tour over to France and Italy, and they put me against Savage in the big show. That's the only one he did was Paris, France. He came in, him and Miss Elizabeth got to fly in on the Concorde jet. It was still running at that time, so they flew them over on it, which is like, I don't know, what, $10,000 a ticket or something. The rest of us flew regular, jets over there. So I got the main event with him over there. So, like I said, I got to work with him a lot of times, even when he wasn't world champion, for whatever reason, I'd end up with him. I don't know if he was going to Vince and say, hey, I'd like to, I want to, try to work with him. Just maybe because of the trust factor, especially if you're world champion, you don't want to be getting beat up every night by somebody beating you up, because you got a lot of places to go to, a lot of things to do, so you want to try to stay healthy. So I guess I was the one guy you could trust to keep him healthy.
Got it. Hey, so we do have a few fan questions, and then I had a few questions, and we can kind of start getting to the end. I know we haven't talked about Akeem at all yet. I don't know. I'm sure people go right to Akeem, but it was actually, had a lot of our fan questions from YouTube came, and a lot of them were about Akeem. So we're almost that spot, I would think, anyway. So
Yeah, yeah.
where did that name come from?
Hey, okay. Well,
Or who started the gimmick? That whole
yeah, the idea came from my manager, Slick. Slick went to, Vince was in the idea that he was possibly going to release me. He wanted to let me go for whatever reason. He just didn't feel that one man gang, was pretty much used up. So Slick went to him and said, "Hey, I got this idea that, take one man gang and let's say he found his roots in deep as dark as Africa. Let's call him Akeem." So he told Vince, and Vince jumped on the idea. He really liked it. So they, we was at the TV or something, and Vince passed me in the hallway and asked me, "Do you know how to dance?" And I was like, "Dance?" And I was like, "No, I don't really know how to dance." He said, "Well, you need to learn how to dance." I didn't even know what he was talking about because they hadn't even smartened me up to it yet. So anyway, it ends up, it comes, Slick smartens me up to the thing, and I'm like, man, I thought Slick was, ribbing me. I didn't believe it was real. Sure enough, it was real. So they called me up and flew me up to New York, sent me to a costume shop, and they measured me for the Akeem outfit. They already had the drawings done of it. They had artists in the office. They drew the outfit out what they wanted. So they sent me over there and had the fitting measurements. They made the whole outfit, the yellow thing I wore on the outside, everything was made. So they got it. They finally got it to me, and I made my appearance as Akeem on the way out. Vince was kind of stopped me before on the TV going out and said, "I got a spot for Akeem, but I don't know if I got a spot for one man gang." That was a lot of pressure, I'm thinking, holy crap. So I didn't know what to do. Nobody gave me any kind of instructions.
yeah.
So I said, man, what would Akeem, is blind. So I said, man, I'm just going to act stupid as I can act. So I just went, the curtains opened up and Slick's Jive Soul Bro starts up, and I just started moving, man. I started, hey, yeah, brother, yeah, just being stupid. And I get in the ring. I know I can't dance, but I'm trying to, I'm trying to move, and it just looks, a white guy that can't dance is just stupid looking. But, when I come back through the thing, Vince was right there with the thumbs up like that.
Hey, if he's happy.
It went on. Then it was just, from then on, it was Akeem,
Yeah.
So.
One of the questions was, like, did you want to, not do it? So it sounds like it was either that or leave. So
exactly.
Doing it was the
exactly. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice not to do it.
Yeah.
When the boss wants you to do it, you're going to do it no matter what. But at least they did shoot the vignette where they showed how I kind of changed. We went to the alleyway up in Connecticut and they'd hired professional dancers and all kind of stuff. So had the exploding garbage can and everything. So I popped up behind it, and Mean Gene was out there, and he goes, from now on, Slick was telling him, from now on, this is Akeem. And then he was like, yeah, and we was dancing around with the dancers, had the big boom box on my shoulder here, and they showed me and Slick walking away, like this. Now,
do you still talk to Slick?
Yeah, I talk to Slick. Yeah, all the time I talk to Slick. He's still a minister. Yeah, he was doing it then. He's still doing it now. And he's a cute teacher.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
was he in the Gimmick Battle Royal with you when you came out for that?
No, I don't think Slick was with me at the Gimmick Battle Royal.
He wasn't in that?
WrestleMania 17. I don't think he was there. I'm not sure.
Because you came out as one man gang, right?
Right. They wanted me to come out. They wanted me to come out as Akeem, but I'd lost so much weight. The Akeem outfit wouldn't fit me anymore because it was measured at 400 pounds. But by then I was down to right around 300 or a little over 300. So you imagine what a 400-pound outfit would look like on a 300-pound person. So, but Howard Finkel, called and he said, well, I'll get back in touch with you. And I told him, I could be one man gang. That's about it. He said, well, I'll get back in touch with you. Let me ask Vince. So he asked Vince, and Vince, says, okay. So he said, yeah, you can come in as one man gang. So I went into the Gimmick Battle Royal as, one-man gang instead of Akeem, which they wanted Akeem, of course.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I got to do the Gimmick Battle Royal, that was all right. It wasn't nothing great about it. None of the big shows I didn't get, I was never nervous or anything like people say about, man, you got to be in WrestleMania. Well, it was just another night of work to me. It was just another wrestling match. It wasn't as big. They didn't make such a big deal about it back in those days as they do now. Like we wrestled, when we was at the Trump Plaza and the Toronto Sky Dome and those places, it was just, I'd already been in Coliseum, in stadiums. I'd been in, Superdome. I'd been in the Orange Bowl. I'd been in the Texas Stadium three times. So, it wasn't that big a deal to me.
Yeah, you were saying earlier when you came out with, I can't remember who it was now, we've talked about so much stuff, when it was so loud, you just heard a different level of.
Oh, yeah, when I was working on Hogan now, yeah, it was loud. When you was out there with Hogan and he came, well, I was always first because I was the heel. I'd go out first. Then he would come out, and, man, that place would explode. You couldn't hear nothing, man. It was so loud. The same with him, man. Matches was so easy, man. It was like once you got down about you could do 15 minutes, but by the time he, does his posing at the end and all that, it's a 20-minute match. So once we got a good set, 15-minute match, that's all you had to have. You just do the whole loop for that one match.
Who did you travel with in WWE?
Me and Slick.
Slick,
They took him off the road. When they took the managers off the road, I was pretty much by myself.
Were you?
Yeah, I traveled a little bit with Barry Horowitz and Demolition, but other than that, I was by myself because everybody had different habits, and I didn't want to mess with any of these. I didn't want to be around the guys that had different habits, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
So I was a loner.
So, is there anything else you want to add before we get off the WWF?
You could talk WWF probably for 2 or 3 hours. I
feel like you like the other stuff better, though.
Yeah, I didn't even talk about the Bulldogs or anybody. So,
well, we could talk more about the WWF. I had the feeling you like talking the territories better and probably always talk WWF. So,
well, WWF, that's what everybody goes to right away because that's pretty much what people really remember because that was nationwide, worldwide TV, USA Network or whatever, Saturday night, NBC, whatever. People remember that more than they do territories unless they lived in that territory. Like if somebody lived in Texas, yeah, they'll come up to me and they want to talk Texas, or if somebody lived in Charlotte, they want to talk Mid-Atlantic. But most people, I meet, they want to talk WWF. The number one question is, why did you become Akeem? That's the number one question. Yeah. I tell them straight up, well, I didn't have a choice. You do what the boss tells you to do. That's the bottom line. It doesn't matter. You want a paycheck, you do what you're told to do. I'm just an employee. He's the boss. It's like any job you have in the world. If your boss tells you to go mop out the bathroom, you're going to go mop out the bathroom. If you don't, you leave.
Would they get you a couple extra years? Two or three?
Yeah, give me another couple. I left the company. They didn't fire me. I left the company because it was just, I was beat up. I was hurt. Boss man hurt my ribs at the WrestleMania by giving me that sidewalk slam that he uses as a finish. Cracked one of my ribs, but I couldn't take any time off. So I was hurting so bad in the airplanes, man, was crippling me because we was all in the back, all of us, me, Tugboat, Earthquake, Big Boss Man. You imagine all of us guys squashed up in the back of them airplanes?
No.
So, man, and we was flying every single day to a different city, every day. We'd be going 30, 40, 50 days in a row sometimes. And I love wrestling, but come on, man, you gotta, you need a break sometime,
Yeah.
Territory days, at least I know I'm gonna make it back to the house, I'm gonna make it back home and get to rest a little bit. There, it was just constant, hotel, airport, arena, whatever you're doing, hotel, that's it, blum, 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 day after day after day after day. people say, man, well, didn't you get to do this or do that? I said, no, we didn't see nothing. Well, all we got to see was airport, hotel, arena. That was it. That's all you had time to do, you know? I mean, yeah, we were getting paid good money. I'm not saying the money wasn't good money, but you had to work for it. I mean, that was a lot of stuff going on, especially on TV days. You had to be at TV like at 12 o'clock noon. Had to get suited up right away because you had interviews all day long. You know, they had different compartments and different, you know, they set up different little places because they had internationals, had the local markets and whatever, you know. So all day long you was doing interviews. You get a little catering, food or whatever, but it was still an all day thing. And TV sometimes may go on to 11 o'clock at night, you know, and then luckily I was in another position that I was a lot of times was in the dark match, which means the advertised main event match, you know, against Hogan or some Savage or whoever it happened to be. Because otherwise, all we got for TV was $50. That was it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, the talent coming in, you know, the guys coming in for TV that they brought in, yeah, they got paid, you know, whatever they paid them. I don't know what them guys got. But people that were there worked full time. The wrestlers, it was $50 for us on TV days. You know, unless you were in that advertised dark match, then you got your regular full pay for a regular show.
Right. So you had mentioned the Bulldogs. That was you guys were the Twin Towers, you and Boss Man probably at that time.
Yeah. They made me big Boss Man, the Twin Towers.
You guys had a victory over was that I think they did a tournament where you beat the Midnight Rockers, I believe, too.
Yeah, we beat the Rockers. We beat them at WrestleMania.
Was that WrestleMania?
Yeah,
did you pin Shawn Michaels at that time?
I pinned Shawn Michaels. Yep.
What was he like then?
People that all the time.
What was he like at that time? I guess he didn't refuse to lose it at that point.
No. He was at that time. He was, you know, he just wanted to be part of the company, you know, because they was brand new in. They wouldn't know trouble in. I tell people all the time, yeah, I beat Shawn Michaels. You better believe I beat him. So yeah, they even made a card out of it. They got one of them little gimmick cards, shows me pinning him, you know. People they bring it up to sign. I go, you know who that is right there? That's Shawn Michaels. You see who's winning, right?
Did you ever beat Hogan?
I did beat Hogan, not with a 3 count, but with count outs. We did a couple of count outs. We did one in Long Island, Nassau, Long Island. The guy there, the security guy, after the show, I was on my way out, and he goes, man, that's the first time Hogan's ever lost here. I'm like, yeah, really? Yeah. I would have been one. Huh?
Savage?
Did I ever beat him? No. We always went DQs or count outs, something. It was never, very seldom did we ever catch a pinfall on me, which I didn't care. I would have done it. Yeah. I would have took the big flying elbow from the turnbuckle, you know. No problem with that at all. Man, working Savage, you know, even ICW, but especially there, I noticed it, man. He's like a lightning bolt. I never realized how fast he was. Once I got there, you know, he would be on top of you, do a couple of this, and then, you know, by the time you roll out of the ring to do something, he's already mounted the top turnbuckle to give you the big double schmaz off the turnbuckle, you know, which is a heck of a drop. You know, that's a long way down there. And he'd give you the schmaz, and before you even could turn around and look, he's already back in the ring. You know, that dude was like lightning. I couldn't believe how fast he was. Like,
okay, tell us about the Bulldogs then. Did you guys?
Well, it ain't nothing particular. This is just something I saw when I went there. When I first went in, I seen some stuff. First off, it was with the little stuff you put in your nose. You know what I'm talking about. I couldn't believe it, man. I went into one of the dress rooms and they had the stuff out on the table. I mean, just right there. I'm like, you know, I'm like from Spartanburg, man. I ain't never seen this stuff. And they're asking me if I wanted some of it. I'm like, nah, I don't think so. You know, I'm like, it just shocked me. I'd never seen nothing like that. Then we're in one dressing room and one of the Bulldogs, I don't know, Davey Boy Dynamite comes walking over with a big syringe. This thing's huge, man. It's all full of stuff, big needle. He bends over right in front. I'm sitting here at the locker room there, right beside him. He bends over and the other Bulldog gives him that shot right in his ass. And I'm like, God, what's going on here? I've never seen that before. Then shortly thereafter, we get a memo from Vince from the office saying that the janitors and cleanup crews griping because you guys are leaving your syringes laying around. You know, you're leaving them laying there and putting them in garbage and junk like that. You know, the syringes they're using. I'm like, well, then that's when they started buckling down and we started testing. You know, they started testing for stuff. That was it. You know, none of them guys hardly ever got busted for anything.
Was there pressure to do that? Like the syringe stuff? Was it like
I couldn't tell you because I wasn't doing it. So
yeah,
you know, I don't.
You weren't
I don't
pressured
really
to do it then.
No, I didn't have to do it. I was already big, so. But I mean, you know, you can tell the guy. You know, guys what they look like. You know,
Yep.
so. You know, I don't know. I seen that, but anything else guys was doing, they could, you know, do it. Just don't get me involved with it. You know, that's my way of thinking. I'll just stay in my little world. You do what you do. You know, that's all I wanted. But it just ended up, man. I just couldn't, you know, I just couldn't take it no more. The planes, traveling 30 and 40 days in a row. My body was hurting. You know, I was sore. My ribs were messed up. So we came off a tour. We only get 3 days off, you know, basically enough time to wash your clothes, you know, to get back on the road. And when it come time to get back on the road, I just said, man, I ain't going. You know, so I just stayed at the house. I didn't go. Then probably later that day, might have been the next day, I get a telephone call. It's Pat Patterson. You know, and Pat Patterson gets on the phone. He says, you know, Vince McMahon would like to speak to you. Would you talk with him? I said, sure. So Vince gets on there and, you know, he gives me like, George, what's the problem? What's going on? You know, that deep voice that he always uses. I laid these problems out. I told him, man, I was hurt, this and that, whatever, you know. I can't take it anymore. And he's giving me the line, you know, well, George, that's bad business. You know, you need to do this. You know, I had some stuff lined up for you. You know, you've been on the back burner, but I was going to be moving you up. I had a lot of stuff lined up for you to do. And I was just like, man, I'm sorry, but I just can't do it anymore. He still was like, give me the bad business. That's bad business. That's bad business. And then I said, oh, I'm sorry about that. And he said, okay. And we get the phone back to Pat and we hung up. And then about 2 weeks later, they called the WWF. Was doing a combo show with one of the Japanese companies. They were going to Tokyo to do a show at Tokyo Dome. They called me and Pat was asked me, he said, well, we want you to, would you mind going as Akeem? We want you to go over to, you know, Japan with the company as Akeem and we'll pay you $8,000. And I said, Pat, I can't do it, man. I'm beat up. I'm hurting. I can't do it. He goes, well, you know, if you come back and do this tour, you can come back into the company. Everything will be just like it was before. You know, nothing will be held against you, and and you'll be right back in the company. And I said, no, I can't do it, Pat. I apologize. I just can't do it. And he said, okay, you know, just think about this. You know, you could get back in the company. And we hung up, and that was the last time I spoke to anybody.
Really?
They never called me to do anything till at WrestleMania.
Did you talk to Vince at the WrestleMania 17?
I did talk to him. I apologized, you know, and all that. So, you know, wasn't no real big conversation. Wasn't nothing special. I just wanted to apologize to the guy for walking out on his company after he invested so much money, you know, to make Akeem and, you know, kept me in a pretty decent spot, you know. So he always took care of me that way. Always had me in a good spot. So, I just apologized, you know, for that. So.
Was he receptive to the apology?
Not at all.
No?
Nah. Not at all.
You didn't put it over at all, huh?
He didn't put it over at all. You know, he acted like it was okay. Oh, it's okay, George, no problem, blah, blah, blah. We was all tired and whatever, but you can tell he don't want to hear that crap. But
who reached out to you for that battle royal? Do you remember?
All I know is Howard Finkel called me.
Oh yeah, okay. You said that.
That's all I knew. It was Howard Finkel. And back in even before that, back in the not the early '90s, late '90s, I called up to try to go up there and whatever, and I talked to Jim Ross, and Jim Ross telling me, well, we have a new way of doing things now. you need to send in a videotape and some 8x10s and, things like that. And honestly, I told him, I said, well, Jim, you can watch WrestleMania 4, 5, 6, whatever. You just watch all them shows and you will see me on that. And he goes, this is our way of doing it. We need some 8x10s and we need a video and this and that. And I was like, okay, whatever, man. We just hung up. And then a couple of days later, they called me and said, well, we'll bring you up to TV in I think it was Indianapolis. So I went up to Indianapolis and I did a couple of dark matches, which was, of course, recorded. And one of them was I went against this guy called Flash Flanagan.
Yeah, that was right. Flash. Yeah, he's from India. He's one of our guys, Indianapolis.
Yeah. Well, I worked against him in a dark match, and I ain't gonna say it was the greatest match in the world, but people didn't really care. It was like the opening, like your first dark match of the night. They don't want to see that, man. They want to see the stars. We walked out, you could hear crickets chirping in the back there. We went about 4 or 5 minutes. They put me over on him, and then I come right back. And a couple of minutes later, they sent me back out with one of the guys they called the headbangers. I don't know who they were, but they banged their heads or something, wear this kind of face paint looking stuff or something. I ain't sure. But, they wanted him to go over, so I put him over. And I was going out there, and he stopped me and says, man, I want to apologize to you. And I said, apologize? What are you apologizing for? He says, well, because I'm going to have to, I putting me over you. And I said, you're the star. I'm not the star here. You're the star. It don't matter. And he's like, really? I said, yeah, just go out there. Whatever your finish is, that's what we're going to use. We went out there. I put him over. That's all I did. Them 2 matches right there. One made Shotgun Saturday Night. I don't know what happened to the other one. And
you one-man gang again? Or
yeah, I was one-man gang. And I picked up a couple of grand and went on back to the house, and that was it. Nobody had any ideas about using me. So the next thing, they called me up for the Gimmick Battle Royal. Lasted 3 minutes. Got paid $500.
Yeah.
So,
that's wild. But then you were, we have to get into that. You were in WCW a little bit after that, though, right?
Yeah. I was in W. After I left Vince, I stayed home for a little while, and then I just out of the blue, Dusty Rhodes calls me up. He's running WCW down there, and he asked, would you consider coming in and working for me? And I said, sure, why not? So I ended up going down there, for WCW for Dusty basically, and I went in there as one-man gang. Worked a lot of matches with El Gigante, which was like pulling teeth. Man, that was so hard. Man, nicest guy in the world, George Gonzalez, nicest guy in the world, but he was not made to be a wrestler. He just could not, he just didn't get it at all. So, every night was just hard with him, So there was a lot of guys I worked with, but he was the main one. Business was horrible at that time down there. They would run shows like during the Great American Bash, you'd be in big giant coliseums and maybe have 1,000 people.
Oh, really?
Or 2,000 people, something like that. I was on a nightly guarantee, so it didn't matter. I still want to see big houses, but it didn't matter if 10 people was there. I was still gonna get paid, but but it was horrible houses. And then what happened was I lasted down there probably a year or so. Then they had this guy down there called PN News. Rapper dude. I don't know if you know, but
I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we was gonna have some matches around, but they was gonna put him over in the matches, And I said, I told Mike Graham was the agent. I told Mike, I said, nah, I ain't doing that, Mike. And he goes, well, that's what they sent up. They want PN News to go over. You gotta, do whatever you want to do. And I said, I'll do a DQ or a count out, whatever, but I ain't putting him over. I was like, man, who's PN News? I never heard of the guy, But as it turned out, I didn't put him over. And then Dusty calls and tells me, you can't be doing that. That's the finish we sent down. You got to do the finish, because it's just bad. The other guys see that happening. It's just not good business for the company. He says, take you a couple of days off and go home. So I went home, and he called me up and said, gang, if you come in and put PN News over on national TV on TBS, you come in and do the favor right on TV, everything go back the way it was, and nothing, and whatever, everything be just like it was. And I told Dusty, I said, Dusty, you wouldn't do that if it was reversed, you wouldn't do it. And I said, no, I just can't do that, Dusty. And he was like, well, man, I've always took care of you, I've fed your family, and I just didn't, I thought you would, do this for me. And I said, Dusty, I would, but man, this just ain't right. And you know it. So I refused to do it. And that was going to end me in WCW. But before that, I'd already got the news that they were going to switch my gimmick.
Oh, really?
Yeah. At the Halloween Havoc, when they did the electric chair, Abdullah took my spot. He got electrocuted. That was going to be me. Oh. And after the electrocution, I was going to be telling, come out of the electrocution all groggy, and the camera was going to be in my face. And I'd be like, did you see the light? Did you see the light? Like that. And all this. And then they was going to take me out, and then they was going to bring me back on another TV, and they was going to have me dressed, I don't know. I don't want to say like an Undertaker, but more like an Amish type guy with the goofy hat, with the black and all that. And they were going to call me Malachi. And they was going to give me a black book, and it was going to be like the Book of Light or something. You couldn't say Bible, but whatever. But just, it's a book. And supposedly, I was going to be like, I saw the light, like that. And inside the book was going to be carved out with some brass knucks. So during the match, I'd be fighting a baby face. If he was getting the better of me, I'd open the book up with the brass knucks, knock him out, put the book back, like that, But I was kind of like, man, I just come off during one gimmick change, Akeem, and now they're going to change me to Malachi, a preacher type guy. I'm like, man, I don't want to do it. I didn't want to do it at all. Right. They were determined to do it. So that was another reason for me just leaving. I didn't want to mess with it. It may have worked, but
you weren't there at that time.
It may have worked, but I didn't even want to try. Then after that, I just left the business, man. I left for probably 3 or 4 years. I didn't have no skills, All I'd been is a pro wrestler. I didn't have no skills at all because I didn't have, I didn't go to college for no special education or nothing, So basically, I went to a private security company and just became one of those little security guards, that you sit around in your vehicle all night long, just staring at just to be there, wearing your little uniform with their little patch on it. So I did that for the next 3 or 4 years. And then just out of the blue, I don't even know how, I didn't even think they had my phone number. Jimmy Hart and Kevin Sullivan calls me and says, man, we'd like you to come in WCW, and we want to put the United States heavyweight title on you. And I was like, what? Really? Why? I couldn't figure out why they wanted to call me for. They got plenty of guys they could use. But anyway, I gave them a notice. I left that company I was working for. So I went to WCW like a big dummy. So I went on down there, and at Nashville, Tennessee, they were doing one of the big pay-per-views, and the champion at that time was a Japanese guy. God dang, what's his name? Sasaki or something. I don't remember what his name was. But anyway, he was their U.S. champion. He didn't want to lose the belt. So after all the matches all night long, him and I go out dead last in a dark match. And it wasn't even advertised. People's getting up leaving. Luckily, everything's dark. You can't see. The people's just flocking out the building leaving. They filming it. Him and I have a little match. And what happens is I pin him for a 1, 2, 3, but at the 3, he puts his foot on the rope. But the camera don't show that part. They just show me getting the 1, 2, 3. But I didn't really get to win. He ends up beating me. But on the TV, they show me getting the 1, 2, 3. You know, they took that and they clipped it 1, 2, 3, and then I'm the, you know, United States champion
Because he wouldn't lose.
because he wouldn't lose. You know, exactly. And so it ends up I hold that for just a few weeks, and I end up losing it to Conan. I don't know if you know Conan, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
I ended up losing that to him, and then wasn't really doing anything, man. I was on a $500 guarantee. I wasn't doing. We made working 1 day a week, 2 days a week at the most. The thing was, they brought when I first went in, they had that triple ring World War III match.
Yeah.
And the last, you know, it's for the world title. And the last 3 guys in the ring was me, Hogan, and Savage, and Flair was 4 guys. You know, and I'm on a $500 guarantee. You know, these other guys are on multi-million-dollar contracts. And I'm like, man, that something don't sound right here. You know, I'm thinking, but anyway, me and Savage is, you know, last 2, and Savage dumps me, and Savage becomes the world champion. So, but then later on, I end up working Hogan at Caesar's Palace in a 3-minute match. He beats me with a leg drop, just to, you know, basically jobbed out to him, you know, no big deal. Then I go to, you know, Terry Taylor tells me, you know, you need to have a meeting with Eric Bischoff, you know, about your contract, about a contract. I had no contract. I was just on a $500 a night guarantee. So I go in there and I knock on his little trailer door. He calls me in. I said, you know, so start talking to him about a contract. And I said, you know, I just want to ask you about, you know, possibly getting a contract, you know, take care of my family or whatever. I'm on a little nightly deal, but I'm not working but 1 day a week or 2 days a week.
Right.
And Eric Bischoff goes, well, we don't really do things like that here. And you know, then it kind of got a little hot about it. I said, what do you mean? You do that all the time here. You always give them contracts. I said, you got guys that can't lace their boots up on, you know, getting paid $300,000 here. I said, you do it all the time. All I'm asking for is a little contract. I ain't asking for Sting money or Hogan money. Just give me something, you know, just give me a contract to secure. I don't mind putting you guys over, but I want to be paid to put them over. You know, give me something, some security, you know. And he kind of got a little hot at me, you know, kind of bowed up at me. And he was like, well, we don't do that here, but I will talk with Sullivan about it. Now get on out of here, and something like that. I was like, oh, man. I'm not a very political type person. You know, of course, I didn't go in there. I should have been more, you know, Mr. Bischoff, I really like to work for your company if I could, but I just ain't, you know, I don't know how to ask about no contracts. I never had to in my life. Everything was a handshake or something. So anyway, I ended up getting fired. I went home. They sent the booking sheets out. Why they sent me a booking sheet, I don't even know. I was nowhere on the booking sheet. That was that was telling me that I was no longer with the company. I didn't get no official release. You know, nothing came to me, you know, saying we don't need your services, but that was basically the end of it. So
they just sent you a booking sheet and you weren't on it.
I wasn't on it, nowhere. And I'm like, then I'm thinking, why did they even call me to come into this company for? I don't understand. Why would they even do this? I never understood that. You know, and one strange thing happened, whether it's true, if he's, you know, flew in from Baton Rouge to Atlanta. We was going somewhere, Ohio or somewhere, I don't know. I was in Atlanta for my connection. I'm checking in the Atlanta gate there, one of the gates wherever the planes were, and Bischoff is standing right behind me there. So Eric Bischoff, I turn around, he goes, one-man game? And I said, yeah. He says, what are you doing here? He's real like questioning it. And I said, well, I'm going to wherever town is going to. And he says, you work here? And I said, well, yeah, I work here. And he says, I had no idea you work here. Now, whether he knew it or not, I don't know if he did or not. But I'm like, how could he not know that I wasn't working there? You know, I was United States champion for a few weeks. I mean, how do you not know that? That don't even make sense. I just, I don't know if Eric just didn't like me or what. Maybe it's just the way I went in there. If somebody would have came into my office talking that way, I probably would have thrown him out too. I just didn't know how to negotiate, man. I'm an old country boy. I don't know nothing, man. I just knew how to go in the ring, wrestle a little bit, and that was basic. Everywhere I went was just a handshake or something. That's all. I never signed any contracts, so I didn't know nothing about it, And then after that, I did a little movie. Terry Funk got me a movie role. So I did a little movie, Stay Tuned, with John Ritter and Pam Dauber.
John
So
Ritter.
I'm in it. So he got me that. So then I was with ECW for a while. Did about a year with ECW. Did about close to a year with Puerto Rico. Carlos Colon and them guys. So then I ended up. Well, I had a heart attack in 2000 or so. I ended up having a heart attack in Shreveport. I was having an independent match there, and didn't know I was having a heart attack. But ended up, when I got to the hospital, they told me I was having a heart attack. So, that kind of put the kibosh on you for a good while. It didn't stop me. Now, I kept on going up until about 2009 or so, but after that, I just couldn't do it no more, man. My body just gave up on me. My back went out on me. My heart went out on me. Every part of my body went out on me. So
sounds like Rip. He got
just same. Except Rip's got a head full of hair now. He still got those flowing locks. I don't have the locks.
Flowing locks.
I mean, that is a quick run through of what I've done. So, if you wanted to slow it down and do about 10 hours, I could give you more details.
I had some like shotgun questions though that could be like short one word answers, whatever, or little stories if you want to.
I don't know if I can give you one word. I'm too good at that. But
you were talking about the hair. One of them was the questions on the head tattoos.
Yeah, Gary Hart. Yeah, when I went into Texas, he's the one that came up with the tattoos. He said one would be for Kerry and one would be Kevin. So he took me downtown to some shady looking place. Luckily, I didn't get blood poisoning. But Gary we went in there and got some tattoos. Well, I got the tattoos. He didn't get them. Then we got on the TV pointing, this is Kerry Von Erich. This is Kevin Von Erich. Every time I look in the mirror, this is what I look at. These are my war symbols. I'm looking for you, you bunch of punks and things, that kind of stuff.
You got real tattoos for that?
Yeah, real tattoos. Yeah, real tattoos. Yeah. Still got them.
Still got
them. They fading out a little bit, but I still got the tattoos.
Would you have ever done that, Rip? If Gary Hart asked you to get head tattoos?
No. Nah, he wouldn't have done it. This is Playboy Gary Hart. I did it, I think, man, that's pretty good for business. Yeah. He came up with the Chicago Halsted Street. He came up with the vest with the skull on it. All kind of, he came up with all that idea.
That was one of my questions was who was your favorite manager to work with?
Man, that's a hard one there, because I was with so many of them, I don't know, man. If I don't say Slick and he sees this, he'd be hot. So
he gonna get you.
And anytime I say that your favorite or the most or whatever, Rip hates answering those questions.
You can't.
So you can always name it, a couple if you want. If you don't, doesn't really mean.
I mean, everybody I was with was good. That's the problem,
You can still maybe listen.
You got to look, man. Okay. Everybody was good. Humperdinck was good. Gary Hart was good. Skandor Akbar was good. So, I mean, it's hard. You can't just say, who was good.
Yeah.
And Jim Cornette was good. So, and Slick.
Sometimes people still have a favorite.
I can't say it was a favorite. Now, I mean, all of them was good. Great even. What they did. So. It's like people ask you, what was your favorite match? How do you pick a favorite match out of, you have 10,000 matches to pick from. How do you pick one favorite?
All right, so you can always say a couple. If it's not your favorite or whatever, that's fine. We understand. Rip hates those questions too. So if not the funniest, couple funny people that you traveled with. Who were a couple of the fun guys? I know you said you stuck to yourself a lot. You rode with Slick. Anybody that you traveled with, even back in the territory days, that you had maybe the most fun with? The funniest. Funniest in the car, anything like that.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, he was a pretty funny guy. He was nice to be around. always kept you up. Len Denton, he kept you going pretty good singing George Jones tunes in the car. He knew every George Jones song in the world. Black Bart, of course, you know Black Bart. So, another one is always kept you going in the car with, with the chew. So, yeah, so I mean that's about it. I mean I didn't really hang out with the guys. I'll just be honest, man. I didn't hang out with the guys. So
best or easiest. Again, I use easiest. You don't have to. You can give me a couple if you want. Big man to work with. I know you probably worked with mostly big man in your bigger matches, I would say, but favorite big man to work with, easiest.
I'd probably have to be Andre more than likely. Andre is probably, one of my favorites. It was easiest. Big John Studd, he was pretty easy to work. I mean, I guess if you want to say Hogan, I don't know if you consider him a big man, but he was easy.
Most people he is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but other than that, honestly, I didn't work with that many, super heavyweights. I was, I worked, smaller, a lot of smaller guys, Tito Santana, those type guys, which is, I know it sounds crazy, but I mean, you still have a good match even with them guys like Tito. Who can't have an easy match with Tito Santana or somebody like that, Demolition, we worked a lot with Demolition. They're not super heavyweights, but they're big guys,
Yeah.
But I mean, it's all easy. It's all easy matches. It's what you make of it. I had matches with Ultimate Warrior. I didn't have no trouble with Ultimate Warrior. A lot of guys bitch and groan about it, but I didn't have one problem with Ultimate Warrior at all. So, why? I don't know why. I didn't ask him. I just went out there and hopefully we have a good match and whatever happens, happens. To have a count out or a DQ or something.
Favorite tag team partner?
Favorite tag team partner probably would be, I don't know. I ain't going to say Big Boss Man. He wasn't my favorite. Not that I didn't like him, but yeah, I'd see. I didn't have that many tag team partners, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was mainly a singles guy. I mean, when I was in tags, it wasn't like a constant, it wasn't a full-time thing. I wasn't in that many. I tagged with Kelly Kaminsky and I tagged with Big Boss Man, but past that, I didn't really have any full-time tag team partners. I was mainly a single guy. So I can't really answer that one.
Gotcha. Stiffest opponent?
Stiffest, well, I wasn't working myself, so I can't say myself. So probably have to be, I say stiffest, snuggest, Bruiser Brody, Stan Hansen, any of the Von Erichs, along those roads.
You mentioned Garvin earlier.
Yeah, Garvin. I forgot about Garvin. George the Animal Steel.
Oh, really?
Snug. But past that, I mean, really, after that, it really wasn't nobody. If they were stiff, I didn't even notice it, to be honest. I mean,
yeah. Was there anyone you wanted to wrestle that you never wrestled?
From back in those days, not really. I got to wrestle against Terry and Dory in Japan. I got to wrestle against Bruno Sammartino. So I mean, back from those days, not really. I mean, I wished I could have got around to some other territories like Portland or somewhere like that, but I always stayed more in the southern areas, I never made it like the Portland or the Florida. I mean, Florida, but that other one, Southeastern or whatever it was called. Never made it to those type places. I wished I could have, but I did make it to Kansas City. I got sent up there for a couple of weeks. That was a nightmare. It was like being out in the wilderness somewhere. Just.
Of course, Rip loved it. So speaking of territories, favorite territory. We're not going to count Mid-Atlantic though, since that was your home base.
Yeah. I'd be a giveaway right there, right? Yeah. So, I'd probably have to be Florida because I mean it's like a vacation basically. I mean, pretty much home every night except for Miami or a few of the Jacksonville or somewhere, and you're pretty much home every night. You're in Florida. What the heck? I mean, you know what I'm saying? So you're getting paid to be on a vacation. So probably Florida.
Do you watch current wrestling, AEW or WWE?
I can answer that very quickly. No, I do not watch any product at all. And I'm not saying that they're bad athletics. Sorry, I mean they're athletes. They do what they do, and they do it great. But I'm just not interested in seeing 20 finishes. Used to be a pile driver was a finish. It used to be a suplex was a finish. It used to be whatever was a finish, and that was it. I mean, it was over with. Man, nowadays you see so. I mean, I just don't want to sit there and watch it. You know, it's just like spot. They're moving so fast. I don't even know what's going on. I don't even know how the announcers can call what's going on. The guys do so much in the ring at one time. It's just ridiculous. I don't watch anything they do. You know, I know I've heard a few of the names and things, but I do not watch it at all.
Got it. Favorite promoter? Did you have a favorite promoter?
Man, that's hard. You know, shoot. Well, Bill Watts always took care of me. So, you know, for me, probably him. He's the one that kind of, besides the Poffos, you know, they took me in and, you know, when I was nobody and kind of got me started. But Bill kind of took me in and, you know, kind of took care of me through my whole career almost, you know. So,
good deal.
Yeah, I'd say him. Besides Poffos. I always tell Lanny when I bump into Lanny somewhere, I'd say, Lanny, you know, if it wasn't for you guys, I never would have made it. He's like, I know I had your career right in my hand, just like that. I could have crushed it. Lanny was, man, what a nice guy Lanny was. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a good run in WWF too. You know, he got to work. He worked that genius gimmick with him and Hogan. You know, he got a heck of a run with Hogan. You know, so
was there ever true? Maybe you know that. Was there ever any truth to Savage took a pay cut to get Lanny in WWF? You know anything?
No,
about
that was in WCW.
I know that WCW. Savage took $300,000 off of his contract, which was making like $2 million anyway. But he took $300,000 and told him to give it to Lanny because they wasn't going to give Lanny a contract. But
I don't even remember.
He said, "Don't tell him it's come from me." He wanted it known that I think it was coming from the company. So he gave Lanny the money off of his contract. You know, they never used Lanny at all, but Savage made sure he was taken care of. But it was his money, Savage's money. So
yeah.
Oh, so no wonder I didn't realize.
So they basically got Lanny for free. What they was going to give.
Yeah. They didn't pay nothing for Lanny. Savage paid for it, but
that's a hell.
He was going to take care of Lanny no matter what. They was always close knit family, so you know it's just the way they were. Family wise, they were close always.
Wow, well, that was awesome, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I know you did it for Rip and not for me. That's all right.
Yeah, it was Rip. If you would have called me, I was like, "Who is this Mark? I ain't talking to this Mark."
Hey, it's all right.
Big gold and a billfold, so swole that I can't get the shit closed. So I money fold and rubber band wrap, and when it